As you settle in tonight, let me transport you to a world both alien and achingly familiar. Imagine, if you will, a sudden, jarring shift, but a sharp, disorienting lurch. The soft glow of your bedside lamp is extinguished, replaced by a dim, flickering luminescence. The hum of modern appliances vanishes, swallowed by an unnerving silence broken only by the distant cry of a dog and the creak of ancient timbers. You open your eyes, not to the comforting familiarity of your bedroom ceiling. Hewn wooden beams, dark with age and smoke. The air, once filtered and temperate, is thick with the pungent odor of damp earth and something vaguely animalistic. Your body feels different, heavier, stiff. A dull ache thrums in your joints, companion that you've never known before. This is not a dream. This is your new reality. You are no longer you. You are a serf. Our Lord 1066. The initial shock is a cold wave that crashes over you, leaving you breathless and trembling. The romanticized images of chivalry, of sun-drenched fields and merry villagers, dissolve like mist in the harsh, unforgiving light of truth. You try to sit up, and your hands, calloused and rough, scrape against the coarse straw that serves as your bedding. Is scratchy, smelling faintly of urine and dried mud. You look down at your own body, or rather, the body you now inhabit. Thinner, your skin weathered and tanned by an unforgiving sun. Your fingernails are broken and caked with dirt. Simple tunic you wear, made of coarse wool, feels rough against your skin, its weave uneven and bulky. There are no seams you recognize, promising comfort. The hut you find yourself in is small, barely more than a single room. The walls are made of wattle and daub, interwoven branches plastered with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung. The roof, thatched with reeds, sags in places, hinting at leaks and the constant threat of the elements. In the center of the room, a small fire smolders in a shallow pit, its smoke curling upwards towards a hole in the roof. The only ventilation is thick with this acrid smoke, stinging your eyes and coating your throat. There is no furniture as you understand it. Wooden stools, a simple wooden chest, and the straw-filled pallet you've just woken upon. The floor is packed earth, uneven. A guttural cough from the corner jolts you further. An older woman, face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by hardship and sun, is stirring. Her hair, thin and grey, is tied back with a scrap of cloth. Shimmer rough tunic, stained and patched. Her eyes, a dull, weary blue, meet yours, and there's no recognition, no surprise, ingrained resignation. Awake, she rasps, her voice like dry leaves skittering across stone. The sun will be up soon. The Lord's men will be out. You open your mouth to speak, to ask where you are, who she is. Croak emerges. Your throat feels parched, your tongue thick. You try again, forcing out a question. Where am I? She blinks slowly, her gaze unfocused. Where else but here? The village of Oak Haven, under the manor of Lord Fitzwilliam. She turns back to the fire, adding a few more twigs. Your young Thomas's mother, or was it his sister? They all look alike after a while, Ace. This simple interaction, devoid of warmth or curiosity, stark illustration of your new existence, your past life, your identity, your very name, all seem to have been erased, assigned by circumstance. You are not an individual, you are a cog in a vast agricultural machine. As the first rays of dawn begin to pierce through the gaps in the wattle walls, the sounds of the village begin to stir. The lowing of cattle, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, all are muted, carried on the damp morning air. You rise, protesting with every movement. Your stomach growls, a hollow, gnawing emptiness that speaks of a perpetually meager diet. The woman, who you've come to understand, is simply Agnes, hands you a wooden bowl containing a thick, greyish gruel, barley or oats, boiled with water, and perhaps a few scraps of whatever could be found. The smell is bland, almost earthy, but the texture is thick and cloying. You force yourself to eat, the taste unfamiliar and unappealing, but hunger is a powerful motivator. You notice Agnes eats with the same unhurried, almost mechanical rhythm. Best eat what you can, she mutters, fixed on the bowl. There's the field to work, the Lord's fields first. This is the reality of feudalism. Your life is not your own. You belong to the land, and the land, in turn, belongs to the Lord. Will be dictated by the rhythm of the seasons, the demands of your Lord, and the ceaseless cycle of planting, tending. There are no holidays, no weekends, no paid leave. Your existence is one of perpetual, back-breaking toil. You step outside the hut, and the sheer scale of the village, though small, is overwhelming. A few dozen similar huts are clustered together, roofs a uniform brown against the green, muddy landscape. A central well serves as a gathering point where women exchange hushed, practical words while drawing water. Children, their faces smudged with dirt and their clothing threadbare, wooden toys or chase stray chickens. The air, though fresher than inside, pervasive smell of manure from the animal pens. Looking towards the distant rise, you see the manor house, fairy tale castle of your imagination. It's a solid, stone structure, imposing and functional, symbol of power and authority. It is here that your Lord, Lord Fitzwilliam, resides, his life a stark contrast to your own, and command, fueled by the sweat of your brow and the labour of your fellow serfs. Archival research that life expectancy for a serf in the 11th century was tragically short, often no more than 35 years. That's if you survived childhood. Disease was rife-chipant, sanitation non-existent, and medical knowledge rudimentary. A simple infection, easily treatable today, could be a death sentence. The food, as you're experiencing, was monotonous and often insufficient. Bred malnutrition. As you stand there, taking in the bleak, unadorned reality of Oakhaven, a realization settles in. A difficult life. It's a life devoid of the very things that make modern life, for all its stresses, bearable. Personal freedom, no upward mobility, no pursuit of individual dreams. Your destiny is predetermined, and obligation. The monotony is profound. Your days will be a relentless repetition of the same tasks, the same struggles, the same limitations. A man, his face weathered and his frame stooped, approaches you. He carries a crude wooden hoe. Thomas, who are you? No matter. The master's fields await. Come, we must not be late. He speaks without looking directly at you, his focus already on the task ahead. His name, you learn, is John, a man who has lived this life for decades, his spirit seemingly as worn as his clothes. The Lord demands the south field be cleared before the week is out. John says he wants it ready for the next sowing. He gestures with his hoe. You'll be turning the soil. It's hard work. You nod, a lump forming in your throat. The sheer, unyielding sameness of it all is the most suffocating aspect. No intellectual pursuits, no moments of profound personal discovery, just endless, back-breaking labor. Antithesis of the romanticized past, a stark, unvarnished truth that's almost too much to bear. As the sun climbs higher, shadows across the muddy ground, you join John and the others, your rough tunic clinging to your sweat, slicked skin. The hoe in your hands feels alien, yet strangely familiar, as if your muscles have been waiting for this moment. Damp and cool beneath your feet, the scent of it rising with every step. You are, for all intents and purposes, a medieval serf. Unadulterated boredom of this existence is the most profound shock of all. The day stretches before you, expanse of repetitive tasks, punctuated only by the passing of the sun and the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. But tomorrow will be the same, and the day after that, and the day after that. The thought is almost paralyzing, a crushing weight on your spirit, with a growing sense of dread how anyone could endure such a life. But as the first clod of earth turns beneath your hoe, kind of thought begins to surface. How does one truly cope with such a life? What mental fortitude, what inner resilience to face such unrelenting monotony? It's a question that will follow you as you continue to navigate this stark, unvarnished past. And next time, we'll delve into the daily routines, the meager sustenance, and the subtle ways these lives were endured. In their own quiet way, even found moments of meaning, of history settles gently on your shoulders as our story begins. You're not just observing the past anymore, you're eving it. Pronouncements, the heroic deeds, the sweeping narratives of kings and queens, those are but the gilded surface, vast, often monotonous bedrock of everyday existence. And that, my friends, is where we're going to dig today. The jousting tournaments and the grand cathedrals for a moment. We're going to experience what it was truly like for the overwhelming majority of people who lived and breathed in medieval Europe, of the unvarnished, often unglamorous reality of life as a serf. Imagine, if you will, a world where your entire universe is contained within a few miles, rhythm of the seasons and the demands of a lord you may never even see. This isn't a fantasy adventure. Deep dive into the ordinary, the mundane, the profoundly boring existence that shaped the fabric of our world. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and prepare to wake up differently, to the gentle chirping of birds outside a sun-drenched window, but to a damp, earthy chill that seeps into your very bones. The first thing that assaults your senses is the smell. It's a pungent, layered aroma, the acrid tang of animal waste, unwashed bodies, the faint, cloying sweetness of decaying straw, and underlying it all, the persistent smell of the earth itself. This isn't the fresh, clean scent of a forest floor, it's the smell of confinement. Cannot escape. Your eyes flutter open, but the dim light offers little clarity. You're not in a soft, familiar bed. Presses against a lumpy, uneven surface covered in what feels like coarse, scratchy animal hides. Just a thick pile of straw that has seen better days. The air is thick, heavy, and still, carrying the faint, metallic scent of old blood and something vaguely sour. Your hands, when you finally manage to move them, feel rough and calloused, the skin cracked and dry. There are nicks and small cuts on your fingertips, remnants of the day's labor. You try to sit up, escapes your lips. Every muscle aches with a deep, bone, weary fatigue that modern sleep doesn't prepare you for. In protest, as you push yourself upright, the dwelling is small, a single, roomed hut, likely constructed of wattle and daub, woven branches plastered with mud and straw. The walls are thick and uneven, some insulation, but also a sense of claustrophobia. There's no glass in the single, small opening that serves as a window. It's lightly covered with a stretched animal bladder or a thick piece of hide, allowing only a meager, diffused light to penetrate the gloom. Packed earth, damp and cool beneath your bare feet, which are already stained with dirt. The sounds, or rather the lack of them, striking. There's no hum of electricity, no distant traffic, no electronic beeps. Instead, the silence is punctuated by the soft, another body sharing this cramped space, your wife, perhaps, or a sibling. You can hear the occasional rustle of straw as they shift in their sleep, the faint drip of condensation from the thatched roof, sounds of farm animals stirring. Outside, you might hear the grunt of a pig or the lowing of cattle, the sounds of your fellow labourers beginning their day. This is not the gentle awakening of a modern morning. It's a slow emergence from a deep, exhausted slumber. You reach for your tunic, a rough-spun garment of wool or linen, coarse against your skin, of sweat and wood smoke. There's no variety in your wardrobe. This one garment, for special occasions which are rarer, is all you possess. Your feet are bare or clad in simple leather turnshos, worn thin. The chill of the morning air makes you shiver, and you pull the tunic tighter, the rough fibers scratching your skin. Reality of the vast majority of people in the Middle Ages, particularly the serfs, who formed the backbone of feudal society. To navigate this existence, your world is primarily the manor, the land owned by a lord. Your life is tied to this land, essentially bound to it, unable to leave without the lord's permission. This system, known as serfdom, across much of Europe from the early Middle Ages until the late 15th century, you are not a slave, be bought and sold independently of the land. However, you are not free either. You owe labour called Eve Corvée to your lord. This means you must work his fields for a certain number of days each week, in addition to tending your own small plot of land, feed yourself and your family. The food is simple, often meagre, consists mainly of pottage, a thick stew made from grains like barley or oats, peas, beans, and whatever vegetables you can grow. Rarity, feast days, or if you're lucky enough to hunt game air, which is often forbidden and punishable by severe fines. Bread, rye or barley is a staple, but it's often dark, heavy and coarse. Access to some dairy products if your family owns a cow or goat, but milk is precious. Fresh fruit is a seasonal luxury. A world where the vibrant variety of produce you find in a supermarket today is utterly unknown, is accustomed to blandness, to sustenance, rather than pleasure. The architecture of your dwelling reflects this simplicity. Fireplaces with roaring fires, a central hearth with a hole in the roof for smoke to escape is more likely. The furniture is minimal, hewn table, a few stools, perhaps a chest for storing belongings. Your bed is the straw-filled pallet you woke on, concept largely absent. Your family likely shares this single space, sleeping, eating, and living together. Sanitation is rudimentary at best. Waste is often thrown into a pit outside, and clean water can be a precious commodity. The archives of a monastery near Chartres, France, from the 13th century often detail the allocation of land for communal latrines, small but significant concession to hygiene in a world where disease was a constant threat. Your interactions are limited. You see most often are your fellow villagers, those who live and work on the same manor. There's a strong sense of community, necessity. You rely on each other for help during planting and harvesting, for support in times of illness or hardship. Your conversations revolve around the weather, the crops, the Lord's latest demands, and the gossip of the immediate surroundings. As you're tending your small strip of land, your neighbour, a man named Thomas, weathered like old leather and hands gnarled from years of labour, shuffles over. He carries a roughly made wooden rake, mourning, his voice raspy. The Lord's men were by yesterday, said the Lord wants double the usual share of the barley this year. Times are hard, they say. You nod, a familiar knot of anxiety tightening in your stomach. Double. Where are we to find that? My own stores are low already. The rains were poor last spring. where Thomas spits on the ground. We all say the same, but what can we do? He'll have us whipped. Best to just bend our backs and pray the Lord is in a good mood when he counts it. He pauses, drifting to the distant manor house, a stone structure that seems impossibly grand and remote. Here he's building a new wing. Plenty of coin, while we scrape for every grain. Later that day, as you're helping to repair a section of the Lord's fence, a man named William, who acts as the Lord's representative and overseer, rides up on a sturdy horse. He's dressed in better quality wool than you, and his boots are polished. He surveys your work with a critical eye. This section is weak, William says, his voice sharp. The Lord's livestock must be secure. You have until sunset to finish it properly. You don't slack off. I'll be checking. He glances at your patched tunic. Perhaps if you worked harder, earn yourself a better cloak before winter sets in. He doesn't wait for a reply, spurring his horse away. Familiar sting of his condescension and the weight of his demands. This is your daily reality, survival, dictated by the whims of those above you. The days blur into weeks and the weeks into seasons. Is a cycle of planting, weeding, harvesting, and enduring. There are no holidays as you understand them. Occasional religious feast days, which might offer a brief respite from labor, but often involve obligations to the church as well. The concept of a weekend of leisure time built into the structure of your week is alien. Existence is dedicated to the land and the Lord. This is the unvarnished truth of the most common life in medieval Europe. Relentless, often unrewarding labor, punctuated by periods of hardship and uncertainty. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the muddy fields, the familiar ache in your body and the dull weariness in your soul. You gather your meager tools and begin the short walk back to your hut, the smell of wood smoke now a comforting, if faint, signal of home. Thought of the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that stretches before you, a seemingly endless expanse of the same. That, for many, was profoundly predictable, a slow march through the seasons, the dramatic highs and lows that we often associate with history, that built the foundations of the world we inhabit today, a testament to human endurance and the simple, persistent will to survive. And as you prepare to rest, you know that tomorrow will bring much of the same. Learned from period dramas, the truth is far more fascinating. The flicker of the oil lamp, its smoky tendrils curling towards the thatched roof, casts dancing shadows on the rough, hewn timbers of your small dwelling. Familiar earthy scent of damp straw and dried herbs, a comforting perfume that has always been the backdrop to your existence. Wool tunic, scratchy against your skin, feels heavier tonight. It's not the weight of the fabric itself, the weight of understanding that settles upon you, a quiet dawn breaking within the confines of your mind. You recall the hushed whispers you've overheard, the casual pronouncements that ripple through the communal spaces, singular, unshakable truth, the existence of the Lord, of life changes as you begin to truly grasp the invisible threads that bind you. This isn't a land of free men and women, the way you understand it. You are a serf, bound to the soil, bound to the Lord of this manor, wherever he may be. The concept now solidifies into a tangible force, shaping every sunrise and sunset. You understand clarity that chills you to the bone, that your life, your labor, your very existence is not entirely your own. It belongs, in a fundamental way, to another. Let me paint you a clearer picture of this structure, authority that predates your conscious awareness. Imagine, if you will, the year is 1187. The air, carrying the distant bleating of sheep from the common pasture, is filled with the scent of wood smoke and the faint, metallic tang of rain on earth. You are in the county of Kent, on the manor of Oakhaven, is as etched into your soul as the colus is on your hands. Your dwelling, a simple wattle and daub hut with a thatched roof, is small, barely large enough to turn around in. The floor is packed earth, slightly damp beneath your bare feet. The only furniture is a straw-filled pallet and a rough wooden chest containing your few possessions, a spare tunic, a wooden bowl. The Lord of Oakhaven, a man you've never seen, is a presence felt in every aspect of your life, owner of the land and by extension, the owner of those who work it. This is the essence of feudalism, a system that, its purest form, grand castles and justing tournaments, and more about agricultural productivity and the obligations that flowed from land ownership. You are a part of this, a cog in a vast agrarian machine. Your labor, your sweat, your very life force is the engine that turns the wheels of this system. I discovered in the dusty archives of Canterbury Cathedral brittle parchment and faded ink records that detail the obligations of serfs like yourself. For instance, 12th century England might be required to perform a certain number of days of labour on the Lord's demesne in the land directly managed by the Lord each week. This could be ploughing, sowing, harvesting, or any other task deemed necessary. You also owe a portion of your own harvest to the Lord, tax paid in kind. Furthermore, you are tied to the land. You cannot leave Oakhaven without the Lord's permission. Is sold, you go with it, like the trees and the soil. This is known as serfdom, a far cry from the romanticized notions of medieval life, of life changes as you interact with others who share your lot. Earlier today, while toiling in the Lord's fields, a woman whose weathered face and stooped shoulders spoke of decades spent under the same sun. Her hands, gnarled and permanently stained with earth, moved with a practiced efficiency as she guided the wooden plough. Another day, Pharaoh, she'd sighed, her voice raspy like dry leaves. The wheat looks promising this year, though, if the rains hold. You nodded, the familiar ache in your back a constant companion. The Lord will take his share of how much we have left for ourselves. Agnes chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. He always does, doesn't he? Lad, we work the land, the Lord, well, the Lord owns it, and us, in a manner of speaking. She paused, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Remember, when Thomas tried to leave for the town last spring, thought he'd find easier work. The reeve caught him before he got to the crossroads. Back he came with a flogging and a stern reminder of his obligations. The reeve, the Lord's appointed overseer, constant reminder of this authority. He is the one who collects the dues, who enforces the rules, who ensures that the Lord's will is carried out. You see him now, a burly man with a perpetually stern expression, his leather jerkin creaking as he walks among the labourers. His presence is a subtle pressure, a reminder that even in your exhaustion, you are being watched. Later, as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, you shared a meagre meal of pottage, a thick stew of boiled grains, and whatever vegetables were available with your neighbour, named Edmund. The smell of simmering cabbage and onions filled your small hut. Did you hear about the new tax? Edmund asked. A penny for every pig we own, and if you don't have a pig, then 2 chickens. Your stomach tightened, a significant amount, equivalent to a day's wage for some skilled labourers. Where does it end? You murmured. It's spooning the thick, lumpy pottage into your mouth. It tasted bland, nourishing, but uninspiring. Edmund shrugged, his gaze fixed on his bowl. It's the Lord's will. He needs to maintain his household, his retinue. He has duties to the king too, men and resources. This, you realize, is the justification. The Lord provides protection, justice, and military service to the higher nobility, ultimately to the king. This hierarchical structure, this chain of command, the kingdom together. You are at the bottom of this pyramid, the foundation upon which the entire edifice is built. Your life, while seemingly monotonous, is essential. Without your labor, the manna would not produce, and the Lord's obligations could not be met. Inescapable truth, the rhythm of life changes as you accept this fundamental reality, not with defiance, but with a quiet, wary resignation. It's a feeling akin to sinking into a deep, soft bed after a long day's toil. Immediate concerns of survival, the next meal, the coming winter of your family take precedence over abstract notions of freedom. And tonight, as the darkness deepens and the sounds of the manna settle into a low hum of sleeping bodies and restless animals, you feel the profound, overwhelming ordinariness of your existence. This is the world as it is, and tomorrow you will wake and begin it all again, lived in the shadow of an unseen, yet ever-present authority. Quiet hum of the night seems to whisper secrets of the Lord's power, a power that extends even to the dreams you might dare to have. You've probably heard romanticized tales about this period, but the reality was far more complex. The initial disorientation, jarring awakening in a rough spun tunic that smelled faintly of damp earth and stale sweat, has begun to recede, replaced by a gnawing understanding. This isn't a temporary inconvenience. This is your existence. Pre-dawn air seeps through the thin walls of your wattle and daub dwelling, a constant companion. Texture of the straw mattress beneath you, a scratchy embrace that does little to soothe the ache in your bones. The packed dirt floor mingles with the ever-present aroma of wood smoke and something vaguely animalistic, the scent of the livestock penned nearby, yet burdensome, part of your life. Outside, the first tentative chirps of birds begin to pierce the lingering darkness, a sound that, offering hope, signals the inevitable commencement of another day of relentless toil. Glow of the dying embers in the communal hearth, visible through the cracks in the wall, offers a measure that does little to dispel the pervasive dampness. Your stomach rumbles, a hollow echo against the silence, remind of the meager sustenance that will fuel you for the arduous hours ahead. The weight of it all, the sheer, unyielding sameness, a shroud. Experience becomes your teacher. The Lord's manna, a solid, imposing structure of grey stone that dominates the landscape, remains a distant, untouchable entity. Your world is the open field, track leading to it, and the cramped, smoky interior of your shared dwelling. The sun, a fiery orb climbing higher in the sky, shadows across the furrows you are expected to tend. Your hands, the once accustomed to the smooth plastic of a keyboard or the comforting weight of a book, are now calloused and raw, perpetually stained with the rich, dark soil of the Demazen. You've learned to wield the heavy, iron-tipped plough, biting into your palms with every turn. The oxen, their breath pluming in the cool morning air, are sluggish beasts, dictated by the sharp commands of the reeve, a man whose face is as weathered and unforgiving as the land itself. You feel the strain in your shoulders, your back, your legs, a deep bone, weary fatigue that is your constant companion, a blur of repetitive motions. You bend, you scoop, you drop, seed after seed, precise spacing dictated by tradition and the reeve's watchful eye. There is no room for personal flair, no creative expression. The wheat must be planted in straight rows, the barley carefully spaced, the peas sown in their allotted patches. You see other serfs, as mechanical as your own, their faces set in grim determination or vacant exhaustion. The air is filled with the dull thud of hooves on earth, the lowing of cattle, the sharp cries of the overseers. Freshly turned soil, usually a pleasant aroma in modern times, here carries the weight of obligation, of labor to be performed. One such day, as you struggle to maneuver the plow around a particularly stubborn root, the reeve, a burly man names, approaches. His rough wool tunic is stained with sweat, and his face is creased with impatience. "Come," his voice a harsh rasp. "The sun waits for no man, does the Lord's harvest." He gestures with a thick finger towards the endless expanse of earth. "These fields will sow themselves, move along, or you'll feel the sting of my goad." You flinch, not just from his words, the raw, unvarnished authority in his tone. You nod, your throat tight, and urge the oxen onward. You notice Agnes from the neighbouring hut, her face etched with weariness, struggling with a basket of seed. She catches your eye, shared understanding passing between you. Later, during a brief respite, she shares a piece of hard bread, her movements furtive. "Always," she whispers, her voice raspy. "Best keep your head down, back strong." The bread is dry and tasteless, but the small act of kindness is a momentary balm. You observe the Lord's men, slightly finer tunics, lounging near the manor house, their laughter echoing faintly across the fields. Recipients of your labor, the beneficiaries of your unending toil, a stark reminder of your own subjugation. The cycle continues. You wake before the sun, you work until it dips below the horizon, and you fall into a restless sleep, only to repeat the process. Simple, coarse bread, pottage, a thin gruel of barley, and whatever vegetables are available, and occasionally is successful or the Lord is generous, a meager portion of salted meat. The taste is bland, barely enough to sustain you. Your clothing, a rough, spun tunic and breeches, offers little protection from the elements, are spent in the dim, smoky interior of your dwelling, with the smell of burning peat, and the close proximity of your family. Hear the faint strains of a lute from the manor house, a sound that is both alien and a poignant reminder of the vast gulf between your lives. In the archives of the Bodleian Library, that the average serf in the 13th century consumed around 500 calories per day, grains, but the quality and variety were severely limited, leading to widespread malnutrition. This constant grinding labor, any personal reward or autonomy, is the very definition of your new reality. You see your children, ready bearing the marks of hardship, destined for the same life. There is no escape, no upward mobility. Feudal society, as the sun begins its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a profound weariness settle, not just in your body, but in your spirit. The fields stretch out before you, a vast testament to the endless nature of your duties. The rhythmic swing of your scythe, or the steady pull of the plough, has become the only music you know. You look towards the manor house, a silhouette against the fading light. Despair washes over you. This is not a temporary phase. This is the unchangeable rhythm of your days. The sheer monotony is the true enemy, a slow erosion of the self. You begin to wonder if there is any point, any meaning. Relentless cycle. The weight of the world, it seems, rests squarely on your aching shoulders. Tomorrow will bring only more of the same. The thought is a cold, hard knot in your stomach, a prelude to the deep sleep that offers the only true escape. But even in your sleep, the phantom H of the plough handle will linger. waking up in an era where your biggest worry wasn't Wi-Fi connectivity or the latest social media trend. Instead, immediate concern is the gnawing emptiness in your stomach, companion to the chill that seeps through the rough wool of your tunic. You stir on your straw-filled palate, scratching against your skin, a familiar, unwelcome sensation. In your small wattle and daub dwelling is thick with the scent of damp earth, stale smoke from the dying embers of the hearth, present aroma of unwashed bodies and livestock. Outside, the pre-dawn sky is a bruised purple, day of relentless labor. Your hands, calloused and rough, instinctively reach for the small wooden bowl beside your palate. It's empty, of course. This is the reality of your existence, a constant dance on the precipice of hunger, the sheer monotony of it all, relentless cycle of dawn to dusk toil with so little to show for it, is the most profound difference from the world you left behind. Passing moment, the stark reality of your diet as a medieval serf sinks in a cold, a romanticized historical fiction can truly convey. Your sustenance is dictated by the seasons of weather and the demands of your lord. Forget the abundance of a modern supermarket, endless variety of flavors and textures that you once took for granted. Your plate, even call the rough wooden trencher a plate, will likely be dominated by a few staples, a simplicity that borders on the brutal. The foundation of your diet is bread, not the light, airy loaves you might recall. Pumpernickel or rye bread, often coarse and gritty from the stone, ground flour. Sometimes harvest was good and the Lord's share was manageable. You might have a bit of barley or oat porridge that offers little in the way of satisfaction. Vegetables are seasonal and scarce. In the summer months, find some cabbages, onions, or leeks, often boiled into a bland mush. Turnips and peas are more common, crops that can withstand the often unforgiving climate. Fruits are a rare luxury of wild berries or a few apples in the autumn, preserved as best as possible for the lean winter months. Meat, distant memory, a dream for feast days, which are few and far between. The lord of the manor, Sir Reginald de Montfort, in his imposing stone castle, just a mile's ride from your humble village of Oakhaven, primary beneficiary of any game hunted in the surrounding forests. For you, salted pork might appear on your table a few times a year, a precious commodity carefully rationed. From the local stream is a more likely source of protein, but even then, it's often small and bony. One morning, your fellow villagers at the communal well, the damp, cool air carrying the murmur of hushed conversations. Agnes, whose face is etched with the hardships of her 30-odd years, offers you a wary smile. Another day, another gnawing in the gut, she says, her voice raspy. Young Thomas's mother, Alara, she managed to catch a rabbit yesterday. A small one, but she says she'll share a morsel with those who helped her mend her roof last week. You nod, envy mixed with a flicker of hope. Community, you realize, is not just about shared labor, but shared sustenance, however meager, as you toil in the Lord's fields, turning the heavy soil with a crude wooden plow pulled by a wary ox. Thomas, to his teens, approaches with a small pouch. My mother sent this, he says, his eyes wide and hopeful. Inside, a piece of hard, dark bread and a few dried peas. It's not much, but the warmth of the gesture, the shared humanity in this brutal existence, is more nourishing than the food itself. Thank you, Thomas. You manage. Tell your mother I am grateful. He beams, a rare sight, and then scurries back to his own labors. In my archival research, that in the 14th century, during periods of famine, the price of grain could skyrocket, bread a luxury few could afford. Many relied on foraging for roots and herbs, or even eating acorns, practice that could lead to severe digestive problems. Dietary diversity was a primary cause of widespread malnutrition and disease. The concept of a balanced meal, food groups, was utterly alien to the medieval serf. Theirs was a life of survival where every calorie counted. Meal was never guaranteed. With each passing moment, mutations of your diet reinforce the rigid social structure you inhabit. Your labor is for the Lord, largely belongs to Him, and your own sustenance is a secondary concern. Scarcity breeds a constant awareness of your place in the hierarchy, a daily reminder that your life is not your own. On your table, or lack thereof, is a testament to the power and privilege of those above you. The thought of a leisurely meal, of choosing what to eat, is as fantastical as flying. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the fields, familiar ache in your bones, your stomach rumbles, a hollow sound in the encroaching twilight. Tonight, be more bread, perhaps a thin broth, if anyone has a spare turnip to spare. The thought of it is not appetizing, necessary. You look towards the distant, warm glow of the Lord's castle, beacon of Clunty that remains forever out of reach. Your world is defined by what you eat and what you don't. Gnawing hunger is a constant whisper, reminding you of your precarious existence, chasm that separates you from the lives of the nobility. It is a life of constant want, and as you trudge back to your dwelling, that want settles upon you, a heavier burden than any plough. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, the same meagre fare, same unending labor, a testament to the most unexciting existence imaginable. Told you that everything you thought you knew about this period was incomplete, a polished veneer over a reality far more textured, more binding. Pronouncements of royal decrees or the dramatic clashes of knights you might have seen in illustrated manuscripts. Heart of this era, the very bedrock upon which kingdoms were built and sustained, lay in the quiet rhythm of the agricultural year, and within the intricate, often suffocating web of the village community. A solitary adventurer in a land of myth, you are a cog, a vital yet ultimately replaceable part of a vast, human-powered machine. Touched upon is an ever-present shadow, his demands a constant hum beneath the surface of daily existence. But it is the village itself, the collective, that truly shapes your world, dictating your every action, your every thought, every breath. Your life is not your own, not in the way you understand it. It belongs to the land, to the seasons, and most importantly, destiny of your kin. The passage of time reveals the profound interconnectedness of this society, a tapestry woven with threads of obligation, mutual dependence, and an almost suffocating familiarity. Born into a specific plot of land, a specific family, a specific role within the village of Oakhaven. In the fertile valley of the River Thorn in the year of our Lord, Tun 67, your dwelling and daub structure with a thatched roof smells perpetually of wood smoke, damp earth, present aroma of drying herbs. The interior is sparse as straw-filled mattress on a raised wooden frame, a rough hewn table, wooden bowls and spoons. The floor is packed earth, cool and yielding under your bare feet. Outside, the air, autumn morning, carries the scent of animal dung, ripening apples, and the distant, earthy perfume of freshly turned soil. Is practical, coarse wool dyed in muted browns and greys. You wear a tunic belted at the waist and rough-spun leggings. Caroused and often stained with soil are your primary tools. See them tremble slightly as you grip the worn wooden handle of your hoe, the familiar weight a comfort and a burden. You are etched with the same lines of hard work, The same quiet resignation. There is Agnes, back in a tight bun, her movements economical as she tends her small patch of onions. There is Thomas, broad shoulders stooped from years of labour, his voice a low rumble as he speaks to his son, young Edmund, his father's every move with a seriousness that belays his tender years. The social hierarchy within Oakhaven is subtle yet absolute. While you all share the common burden of serfdom, there are distinctions. A man chosen by the Lord for his diligence and authority holds a position of respect, or perhaps more accurately, of fear. He is responsible for organizing the communal labor, for ensuring the Lord's demesne is worked efficiently. Of free peasants, a rare commodity, who own their own land outright and owe only taxes and military service. You, however, are a villain bound to the land and the Lord. Your obligations are manifold. A certain number of days' labor on the Lord's fields each week, regardless of your own harvest needs. In kind, a portion of your grain, a few chickens, a measure of honey. One afternoon, mending a section of the communal fence that encloses the grazing sheep, the reeve, a stern man named Robert, approaches, creaks as he walks, and his gaze is sharp, assessing. Edith, he calls, his voice carrying across the field, requires an extra day's work on the south meadow tomorrow. The harvest must be brought in before the rains. You nod, your stomach tightening. Tomorrow was the day you had planned to glean the fallen wheat from your own small strip of land, supplement to your meager winter stores. But Robert, you begin, your voice hesitant, my own gleaning. Robert's expression doesn't soften. The Lord's needs come first, Edith. You know this. Lord's harvest suffers, so do we all. The Lord's steward will be inspecting the south meadow at dawn. He turns, his heavy boots crunching on the dry earth, leaving you with a knot of anxiety. Later, as the sun dips below the horizon, sky in hues of orange and purple, you sit with your husband, William, outside your dwelling. The air is cooler now. Stars are beginning to prick the darkening sky. A thin plume of smoke curls from your hearth, a bowl of watery pottage made from boiled barley and whatever vegetables you have managed to cultivate. The taste is bland, uninspiring, but it is sustenance. Robert spoke to me today. You say, your voice low, work the south meadow tomorrow. William sighs, a sound of weary acceptance. He runs a calloused hand over his stubbled chin. Young Edmund was told the same. The Lord's steward is a hard man. We cannot afford to displease him. He looks at you, his eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. We will glean after the Lord's work is done, Edith. This is the rhythm of your life. The collective will, the Lord's decree, written rules of the community, these are the forces that shape your existence. Personal ambition is a dangerous luxury. Needs are subsumed by the needs of the group, the needs of the Lord. You learn to find solace, not in personal achievement, shared hardship in the quiet understanding that passes between neighbors. You learn to anticipate the needs of others, a helping hand without being asked, for you know that tomorrow the favor might need to be returned. I discovered in the archives of St. Cuthbert's Priory, not far from here, a record from around this very time. Communal responsibilities of villains, not just labour, but contributing to the upkeep of the manor church, providing hospitality for the Lord's retinue, and even contributing to the Lord's ransom should he ever be captured. Just about survival, it's about maintaining a complex system of interdependence. Time reveals that this is not a life of grand gestures or personal triumphs. It is a life of meticulous routine, shared burdens, and of the quiet, persistent struggle for survival. Your world is small, bounded by the fields you cultivate. You can safely forage in, and the familiar faces of your community. While the concept of personal freedom as we understand it is alien, there is a form of liberty found in this shared existence, from the crushing isolation that can plague a modern individual. Yet, this freedom comes at a cost, are only beginning to truly comprehend. The village, in its collective strength, also acts as a cage, bars forged from tradition, obligation, and the ever-watchful eyes of your neighbours. The seeds of personal discontent, something more, are sown not in defiance of the Lord, but in the quiet moments between the relentless cycles of labour, when your own thoughts, your own desires begin to surface like stubborn weeds pushing through the carefully cultivated earth. As the seasons turn and the demands on your time and energy continue unabated, these personal stirrings will begin to grow. A subtle tremor beneath the surface of your seemingly unchanging existence, hinting at the internal struggles that are about to unfold. The scent of wood smoke drifts through your consciousness as we begin this journey, a familiar, earthy perfume that clings to everything in this era. Imagine the tang of damp soil, the coppery hint of blood from a recent butchering, the sharp, sweet decay of fallen leaves. These are the olfactory markers of your existence. You are a serf, bound to the land, dictates your life with an unyielding hand, and the days are not measured by the ticking of clocks, slow arc of the sun across a sky often obscured by mist or the smoke from countless hearths. As biting chill yields to the tentative warmth of spring, the burgeoning green of summer's bounty, and the golden, melancholic beauty of autumn's harvest. This is the unchanging rhythm, the ceaseless turning of the wheel, profound comfort in this predictability, a deep-seated security in knowing what tomorrow will bring, much like today and yesterday and the day before that. But it is also a cage, a gilded cage perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. The very cycles that sustain life. Your understanding deepens as you consider the agricultural calendar, rock upon which your entire world is built. From the first tentative stirrings of the soil in early spring, is still cold and grudging, to the frantic, all-consuming effort of the harvest in autumn, is a testament to the land's demands. You rise before the sun, the chill seeping through the thin straw pallet beneath you, wool of your tunic scratching against your skin. The air in the wattle and daub hut is thick with the smell of stale straw, washed bodies, and the lingering aroma of yesterday's meagre pottage. Outside, the dew lies heavy on the unploughed fields, tiny mirror reflecting the pale, dawn sky. Your hands, roughened and callosed, reach for the wooden hoe, handle worn smooth by generations of use. The weight of it is familiar, an extension of your own weary limbs. Fields stretch out before you, a patchwork quilt of brown earth and nascent green. With the darker patches of fallow land, you are assigned a strip, a narrow ribbon of earth, and your task is simple. The lord of the manor, Baron Geoffrey de Montaigne, owns this land, and you are merely its steward, your labour owed to him. I discovered in the dusty archives of a forgotten monastery a surviving fragment of a manorial roll from the year 1274. The obligations of serfs on a manor very much like this one. Precisely how many days of boon, work owed directly to the lord, were required each week. Crops that had to be delivered as rent. Your own obligations are likely much the same. Your day unfolds with a deliberate, almost hypnotic pace. You break the soil, turning it over with rhythmic, back-breaking strokes in your shoulders, and back ache with a dull, persistent throb. The only sounds are the rasp of your hoe against the earth from a fellow serf working nearby, the distant bleating of sheep and the mournful cry of a curlew pause to drink from a water skin, the lukewarm water tasting faintly of leather and earth. You might share a few words with Agnes, whose face is as weathered as your own, her movements as slow and steady as the turning of the seasons. The barley looks thin this year, does it not? Agnes might say, her voice raspy from the dust. You nod, sweat from your brow with the back of your hand. The rains were late, held on too long. May the saints have mercy on us, she murmurs, her gaze fixed on the distant manor house, a solid structure of stone that seems to mock the fragility of your own existence. It is a constant reminder of your place, your station. Understanding deepens as you consider the social fabric of this community. While you are tied to the land, you are not entirely isolated. In a small settlement, a cluster of similar huts huddled around a simple wooden church, the priest, Father Thomas, is a man of God, a man of the manor, his sermons often laced with pronouncements on obedience and the divine right of kings and lords. A burly man named Alfred is essential, his hammer ringing out a steady beat that punctuates the otherwise quiet landscape. Sharpens your tools, mends your plowshare, and occasionally, if you have something to trade, crafts a sturdy buckle or a simple knife. After a particularly arduous day in the fields, you might find yourself gathered with a few others around a sputtering fire. Burning dung, used for fuel, mingles with the scent of roasting roots. Young Elara, her face smudged with dirt, as she watches a dog chase a rat. Her father, a man named Richard, whose eyes hold a quiet resignation, speaks of the coming feast day, a rare break from the relentless labor the Baron's men will be bringing in game. Richard says, his voice tinged with a hopeful note, will be a scrap for us. You nod, a flicker of anticipation in your own wary heart. A feast day, toiling in the fields, a chance to perhaps eat something other than the usual gruel from the crushing weight of your obligations. But even then, the underlying reality remains. The Baron feasts for the scraps. This is not a life of grand adventures or personal triumphs. It is a life of quiet endurance, sowing and reaping of birth and death, all played out against the unchanging backdrop of the seasons. Standing deepens as you realize that even these small joys are fleeting. The feast day will pass, the hangover will fade, will still call. The cycle will continue, unbroken, unrelenting. You are a cog in a vast, ancient machine. Your purpose is to turn, to labor, to contribute to the sustenance of a world that rarely acknowledges your individual existence. Very predictability that offers a strange form of comfort also serves as a constant reminder of your immutability, your inability to escape the boundaries of your birth. The sun will rise tomorrow, and you will rise with it, a testament to the unchanging seasons. The next dawn will bring the same tasks, the same landscape, the same quiet existence, a gentle reminder of the enduring nature of your lot. Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to truly experience life in this distant time, not as a detached observer, but as a participant in its rhythms and realities. Subpart 8 of our exploration delves into the very fabric of a single day, necessity and relentless labor, a stark counterpoint to the romanticized notions often painted. Strolls or moments of quiet contemplation, your existence is dictated by the sun's arc and the demands of the land. First hint of grey light to the settling of dusk, your day is a testament to a life stripped bare of personal choice. Exertion of physical will against the indifferent earth. Teach you that dawn is not a gentle awakening, but a brutal summons. Before the cock's crow has fully echoed through the damp air, You are already stirring. The straw mattress, rough against your skin, offers little comfort. Scratchiness you barely register anymore. The wattle and daub dwelling is thick with the lingering scent of last night's meagre fire, a smoky, earthy aroma that clings to everything: your coarse woolen tunic, your matted hair, even the very air you inhale. Your hands, and often cracked, instinctively reach for the rough-spun breeches and tunic laid out the night before. There's no lingering over a cup of something warm. Water, if available, is likely drawn from a communal well, faintly of minerals and the surrounding earth. Stepping outside, the chill bites at your exposed skin. The sky, grey, promises another day of toil. The village, huddled together for warmth and protection, is already stirring, lazily from a few chimneys, the only visible sign of life beyond the lowing of cattle and the distant bleating of sheep. Destination is the Lord's fields, or perhaps your own small strip of land, depending on the day's allocation. The path, countless feet, is muddy and uneven, a familiar terrain that your feet navigate with an ingrained, almost unconscious garrity. The weight of the tools you carry, a heavy hoe, a scythe, or a wooden ploughshare, depending on the season, is a constant. Shoulders. The work itself is monotonous, back-breaking, and utterly essential for survival. If it's planting season, your fingers pushing seeds into the cold earth, the rhythmic motion a hypnotic, soul-numbing exercise. It's harvest, you're swinging your scythe or sickle with a force born of desperation. Swish and thud of falling grain a constant drone. There are no breaks for idle chatter, no moments to admire the burgeoning fields or the flight of a bird. Your focus is absolute by the need to complete the task before the light fails. You observe the subtle shifts in the soil, whispers through the stalks, not with appreciation, with a farmer's instinct for what these signs portend for the yield. I discovered in the archives of the Bodleian Library, tattered manorial record from the year 1287, a detailed account of a serf named Thomas of Oakhaven. Was 5 acres of arable land, requiring him to work the Lord's demesne for 3 days a week. The remaining time, his tasks included ploughing, sowing, weeding, and reaping. Additional duties such as ditch digging and hedge mending. The records mention no leisure, personal pursuits beyond the bare necessities of existence. His life, like yours, was a cycle of unremitting labor, agricultural calendar, and the Lord's demands. Around midday, a brief respite might be granted. It's not a time for rest, sustenance. You might sit on the damp earth, pulling out a hunk of dark, dense bread, perhaps a handful of dried peas or beans, a little cheese if you're fortunate. The water from your skin flask is lukewarm and tastes of leather. You eat quickly, scanning the fields, already anticipating the return to work. You might exchange a few gruff words with your fellow labourers, wary recognition, a shared sigh. Another day, another patch, grunts a man named Alfred, wiping sweat from his brow with a dirt-stained forearm, his face weathered like old leather, expression of resigned wariness. You nod, your throat tight. Alfred, barley ripens fast this year. As if it matters to us, he mutters, his gaze fixed on the distant manor house, a solid, imposing structure that represents a world utterly removed from your own. We just break our backs for it. The afternoon stretches on, mirror of the morning's efforts. The sun, if it deigns to appear, offers little warmth, its rays diffused through a hazy sky. Ache with a deep, persistent throb. Your mind, dulled by fatigue, drifts, but never towards pleasant reverie. Internal tally of tasks yet to be done, the fear of a poor harvest, worry of sickness or injury that would render you useless. As the shadows lengthen, signaling the approach of evening, the pace quickens. There's a desperate urgency to finish before darkness descends completely, for the Lord's fields must be left in order. The return journey to your dwelling is slower, your steps heavier. The scent of wood smoke now carries the promise of a rudimentary meal. Inside, the dwelling is dim. Your wife Elsbeth, her hands rough and chapped from similar labours, might be tending a small fire, preparing a thin gruel or pottage. The children, their faces smudged with dirt, huddle near the hearth. Small tasks completed, gathering firewood, watching the meager livestock. The conversation, if any, is brief and practical. Today, Elsbeth asks, her voice raspy. He was near the western boundary. You reply, sinking onto a low stool. Requires more fencing work come next week. A flicker of despair crosses her face, quickly masked. Manage, she says, more to convince herself than you. The evening meal is eaten in near silence. Firelight casting dancing shadows on the rough walls. There is no entertainment, no books, no music. Is confined to the immediate, the tangible, the necessary. You might mend a tool, sharpen a blade, or simply sit to do anything but exist. The sounds are the crackling fire, the occasional sigh, the rustle of straw. The smell is of smoke and the faint, unwashed scent of humanity packed together. Before sleep claims you, you might look out through the small, serves as a window. The stars are a distant, indifferent spectacle. You are not contemplating the cosmos, merely registering that another day has passed and tomorrow will, without doubt, be exactly the same. This relentless repetition, personal time or individual expression, is the core of this existence. Teach you that this is not a life of quiet desperation, but of active, ceaseless exertion, where the concept of free time is as alien as the stars above, defined by the relentless march of the sun and the unyielding demands of survival. Is the stark reality that lies beneath the romantic veneer of the past, that starkly contrasts with our own modern notions of leisure and personal fulfillment, where your worth is measured solely by your capacity for labor, a stark reminder of the privileges we often take for granted. Understanding deepens as we consider the profound limitations placed upon individuals in such a society, to understanding the intricate web of social obligations that further shaped their lives. You've seen the movies, read the books, but the lived reality was something else entirely. The flickering torchlight of a dimly lit chamber, only illumination beyond the pale dawn or the encroaching dusk casts long, dancing shadows across rough-hewn wooden walls. The air, scents of damp earth, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present aroma of wood smoke from the hearth to your coarse wool tunic. This isn't a romanticized tapestry, it's the gritty, unvarnished truth of your existence. Left you with the rhythm of a day, the endless cycle of labor. Now, as the sun climbs higher, a new understanding dawns, one that gnaws at the very foundation of your meager existence, the relentless, soul-crushing burden of taxes and dues. You thought you were merely laboring for sustenance, but you quickly learn that a significant portion of your sweat and toil is not your own. Surplus of saving for a rainy day or a brighter future is a luxury as distant as the moon. The weeks pass and you discover the intricate web of obligations that bind you to the Lord of the Manor, Lord Armand. Imposing figure and stern gaze are rarely seen, but whose presence is felt in every aspect of your life. It begins subtly, perceptibly. After a particularly successful harvest, where the grain bins are fuller than usual, tithe, not a voluntary offering, but a mandatory tenth of everything you've grown. The miller A stout, flour-dusted man named Thomas takes his cut for grinding your grain, a fee paid in kind, naturally, Lord's share, a portion of that already reduced harvest, collected by his reeve, a sharp-eyed man named Gareth. A scraped piece of parchment seems to hold your very fate, parson. You discover that it's not just about the grain. The Lord owns the mill, so you pay to grind your grain. So you pay to bake your bread, a significant portion of your flour, even after the tithe, surrendered for the privilege of using the communal oven. This fee, often a loaf of bread or a portion of your dough, vanish into the Lord's larder with alarming speed. Even the few chickens you manage to raise, a small comfort in the otherwise monotonous soundscape of bleating sheep and lowing cattle, hen tax, a levy of eggs paid weekly. You remember Elsbeth, worn hands moved with practiced grace as she gathered eggs, her sigh a quiet testament to the constant drain on her small flock. You discover the labor, dues, or corvée. This isn't simply working your own small strip of land. Twice a week, more during peak planting and harvesting seasons, you are required to work the Lord's demesne, his personal fields, his vineyards. The work is grueling, the hours long, and the reward as well. The Lord's fields are tended. You see your own meager crops wilting in the sun while you toil on land that will never be yours. The sweat on your brow a testament to your unpaid labor. The physical toll is immense. Your back aches, your hands are calloused and cracked. Gnawing hunger is a dull ache that never truly subsides. The rough-spun tunic, once a novelty, now feels like a second skin. Coarse and irritating against your chafed skin, the simple wooden bowl from which you eat your pottage, a watery gruel of barley and whatever vegetables are available, feels like the height of luxury compared to the thought of what you might be forced to surrender. Pass and you discover the rent for your small plot of land. It's not paid in coin. Coin is a rare and precious commodity. Instead, it's paid in produce in livestock or in labor. A certain number of chickens, a piglet, a portion of your wool, or more days working the Lord's fields. The exact amount varies, and Gareth, the reeve, seems to have a fluid interpretation of the manorial roles, often demanding more than what was initially agreed upon. You recall a conversation with Thomas, the miller, his voice a low rumble of discontent. It's like trying to fill a sieve, wiping flour from his brow. You put in, and it just drains away, never enough to keep. His words echo in your mind of your own precarious financial situation. Pass, and you discover that even the simple act of survival carries a cost. If you need to chop wood for your fire, forest due to the Lord who owns the surrounding woods. If you want to hunt a rabbit, a rare treat indeed. You risk severe punishment for poaching on the Lord's land. The very air you breathe, the ground you walk upon, is ultimately the Lord's. Discovered in the dusty archives of the local historical society, the early 13th century detailing the manorial court records of a similar estate. Listed fines for everything from allowing your pig to stray onto the Lord's pasture to speaking ill of the Lord's steward. It was a suffocating blanket of control. Extract every last ounce of value from those at the bottom of the hierarchy. The weeks pass, and you discover the emotional toll. Constant worry about meeting your obligations, the fear of punishment for falling short creates a perpetual state of anxiety, aspiration. No possibility of accumulating wealth or improving your station. Any small success, effort you put in is immediately claimed by the Lord. System designed to keep you exactly where you are, a perpetual laborer, indebted. and dependent. You see the same wary resignation in the eyes of your fellow serfs, a shared understanding of the futility of their efforts, a stark contrast to the modern world where a successful career or a shrewd investment can lead to upward mobility. Here is your destiny, and your destiny is to serve. You might think of a modern-day minimum wage worker, often barely enough to cover basic necessities, while the context is vastly different. The feeling of being trapped by economic forces, of seeing a significant portion of your hard-earned money vanish into unseen accounts, resonate faintly, but even that comparison falls short, for the medieval serf had no recourse, no unions, no social safety net, arbitrary will of the Lord. The weeks pass and you understand that the economic exploitation is not an abstract concept, very fabric of your daily existence. It dictates what you eat, what you wear, and the limited hours you have to yourself. Any dream of a better life, any flicker of ambition is systematically extinguished before it can even take root. This crushing economic reality sets the stage for the next layer of your existence, the legal limitations, which your freedom is further curtailed, ensuring you remain bound to this land, this lord, and this life of perpetual, unrewarding toil. The further back we go, the more we realize how much courage ordinary life required. It wasn't the grand, sweetened gestures of knights or the pronouncements of kings that demanded true bravery, but the simple, persistent act of existing under a system that offered precious little in the way of personal liberty. You felt the rhythm of the seasons, the sting of obligation. Now we delve into a restriction so fundamental, so pervasive, very contours of your limited world, the absence of freedom to roam. You begin to understand that your existence is tethered, chains of iron, but by the invisible yet unyielding bonds of fealty and custom. The lands you inhabit, the soil you till, air you breathe, all are under the watchful eye of Lord Ashworth. His manor house, a sturdy, grey granite and dark oak, looms on the hill, a constant reminder of your place, its crenellated battlements, more for show than actual defence in this relatively peaceful era of the late 13th century, authority that permeates every aspect of your life. You can almost smell the damp earth clinging to the stones, hear the faint echo of the guards' bootfalls on the parapet. The wind, when it blows from that direction, of roasting meat, a tantalizing aroma that only underscores your own meager rations. Your world, intents and purposes, ends at the edge of the Demazen, the dusty track that leads away from your humble wattle and daub dwelling. Roof a patchwork of straw and moss is not a path to adventure, but a boundary. To venture beyond it, to stray from the familiar fields and woods that surround the manor, requires permission, and permission is not freely given. Imagine it of a spontaneous outing, a weekend trip, a simple desire to see what lies over the next rise is utterly alien. That innate human drive to explore is stifled before it can even take root. Mobility isn't just an inconvenience, it's a deliberate mechanism of control. Lord Ashworth, like most lords of the time, his serfs for labour and for a steady stream of produce and coin. If you were free to wander, seek better opportunities elsewhere, or perhaps simply find a life less burdened by the demands of the manor, such a scenario would weaken his authority and diminish his wealth. So your world is deliberately kept small within the invisible fences of his domain. Even a visit to the next village, perhaps a day's walk away, a formal request. You recall a conversation you overheard between your neighbour, Thomas, and the reeve, a man named Bernard. Face is perpetually etched with a wariness of his duties. Thomas had a brother who had moved to a larger town, seeking work as a cooper. He wanted to visit him, perhaps to see if there was any hope of a less arduous life for his own son. Bernard, his rough-spun tunic smelling faintly of sweat and hay, had been unyielding. "Permission, Thomas," he'd scoffed, his voice a low rumble. "Will be here to mend the northern fence when the rain comes. Who will be here to scythe the barley. Work does not pause for family visits. You owe your labor here to the soil and to the Lord. Brother is no longer of this manner. His life is his own, and yours is bound to this land, as it has been for generations." The words, though harsh, were laced with the unshakable logic of the feudal system. Thomas had returned to his cottage, his shoulders slumped, the faint scent of the reeve's disapproval clinging to him like damp wool. Even within the manor, movement was not entirely free. You could go to the communal well or to the small, rough-hewn church of St. Jude, its stone walls cool and smelling of incense and damp earth. Any deviation from your assigned tasks required a tacit understanding, nod from the reeve or the bailiff. You'd see the bailiff, calloused hands, and a booming voice that carried across the fields, his leather jerkin creaking with every movement. Workers. His gaze, you knew, was not merely observational, it was custodial, was watching to ensure no one was shirking their duties, no one was straying from their appointed tasks. The visual landscape of your life is therefore one of repetition. The same fields, the same hedgerows, the same humble dwellings. The distant, shrouded hills, which might beckon with the promise of the unknown, remain just that, distant. Catch the scent of pine from the deeper woods beyond the manor's cultivated lands, or hear the cry of a hawk soaring high above, fleeting glimpses of a world you cannot touch. Your hands, rough and stained with soil, are accustomed to the feel of the plough, the sickle, the rough weave of your tunic. They are not hands that have ever gripped the reins of a horse for a leisurely ride, smooth wood of a ship's railing. My research that this restriction was particularly acute during times of harvest or planting. Able body was crucial. During these periods, the manor gates, considered gates at all, often just sturdy wooden barriers, were even more closely guarded. Very idea of a serf leaving his lord's land without permission could be considered a form of theft. The labor and loyalty owed. It was a crime not against a person, but against the established order. Understand that this immobility fosters a deep sense of resignation. The desire for change, for exploration, withers without the opportunity to act upon it. It's a stark contrast to today, where a few clicks on a screen can book you a flight to a continent you've never seen, can whisk you away to a new city in a matter of hours. The modern world, for all its complexities, array of choices for movement and experience. Your medieval existence, however, is defined by its limitations, and the inability to roam is perhaps the most profound of them all. It's a life lived within a meticulously defined box, just physical, but psychological. This confinement, this lack of personal autonomy over your own movement, into the other restrictions placed upon you. If you cannot even choose where you walk, what other freedoms might be curtailed? The answer, as you will soon discover, is almost all of them. The scent of damp earth and wood smoke seems to deepen as the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the fields. Tomorrow, continue the same tasks, the same boundaries, quiet acceptance of a life lived without the liberty to explore the world beyond your immediate horizon. The archaeological evidence tells us stories that Hollywood never bothered to explore, lived not in grand pronouncements or heroic battles, but in the quiet, relentless rhythm of survival. caroused by labour, of faces etched with worry, and of hearts that beat with a simpler, yet often constrained, joy. You are now immersed in this reality, a serf in the year of our Lord 1187, on the lands of Lord Reginald de Montaigne, near the bustling town of Rouen. The air, even now, carries the faint, earthy scent of damp soil and fermenting straw. Olfactory reminder of your station. You recall the previous day's trot of taxes and dues levied upon your meagre existence, and the suffocating lack of freedom to simply move. Today, however, shifts inward to the very core of what it means to build a life, to forge a family within these unyielding boundaries. As the seasons change, so too does the landscape of your personal life, a landscape far more barren than any field you till. Marriage is not a matter of whispered affections or shared dreams under a moonlit sky. It is instead a strategic arrangement, decision made not by you, but by the elders of your community, often with the tacit approval of the representative. Your parents' face is lined with the same wary resignation that you are beginning to recognize in your own reflection. Spoken of a potential match. Her name is Agnes. She lives in the neighboring hamlet, a cluster of thatched roofs huddled against the persistent winds. You've seen Agnes at the infrequent market days, her movements shy, her eyes downcast. She is known for her quiet diligence and her ability to spin wool into fine thread, a valuable skill. Your father, Thomas, a man whose hands are as gnarled as the ancient oak at the edge of the manor, called you to his side by the hearth last evening, casting dancing shadows on the rough, hewn walls of your small dwelling, thick with the smell of burning peat and the faint, sour aroma of stale lal. Son, he began, his voice raspy, dry leaves skittering across stone. He gestured with a piece of charred wood, drawing a line in the dirt floor. Reginald's reeve, Master Giles, has spoken with Agnes's father. A union between our families would be advantageous. You felt a familiar knot tighten in your stomach. Advantageous, father. Thomas sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of generations of serfdom. For all of us, his father has a strong back and knows the old ways of grafting fruit trees. Her mother, God rest her soul, was a skilled herbalist, is a resource. And Agnes herself, she is a good girl, dutiful. She will bear strong sons. You looked at the flickering flames, the only source of warmth in the deepening chill of the evening. You imagined Agnes's face, the soft curve of her cheek, the way her hair was usually tied back with a simple strip of linen. Particular ill will towards her, but the thought of this union, orchestrated by others, felt like another chain being fastened around your already restricted life. You had no say. Your feelings, your desires were irrelevant. Way of things. Have you spoken to Agnes? You asked, the words feeling small and insignificant in the vastness of the room. Father's gaze was direct, unyielding. She is a good girl, as I said. She understands her duty, as must you. He paused, softening slightly, a rare occurrence. It is not a life of great passion, perhaps, but it is a life, a secure life. Any can be for us. Two strong hands working together, a roof over your heads, children to carry on the line. What matters? You thought of the stories whispered by the older men in the village, unions that blossomed into genuine affection, but these were rare, like finding a perfectly formed pearl in an oyster. For most, a transaction, a means to an end, to produce heirs, to consolidate labor, to ensure the continuation of the lineage and the stability of the manor. A serf's family was not a haven of personal fulfillment, but a unit of production, overseen by the feudal lord. As the seasons change, your understanding of this system deepens. that even the choice of whom to marry was dictated by the Lord's needs. Arranged to tie two families with particularly skilled labourers, or to consolidate landholdings, however small. You discovered in the manor's scant records, painstakingly transcribed by a weary scribe, that in 1152, predecessor had decreed that all marriages within his domain must receive his formal consent, a practice that continued. Came with a fine paid to the Lord for the privilege of procreation and the continuation of his labour force. A conversation with old Elsbeth, the miller's wife, a woman whose age was a mystery but whose wisdom was undeniable. Seen her mending a torn tunic, her fingers moving with practiced speed. They call it an arrangement, boy, she had said, dry rustle like autumn leaves. But it's more like a trade. Your father brings his strength to the fields, her skill with the loom. Agnes's father brings his grafting knowledge, her mother her herbs, and you, when you marry her, your own labour, and she brings hers. It is a pooling of resources, a way to ensure that when one falls ill, the other can carry on. Survival, not romance. She looked up at you, her eyes, milky with age, seeming to pierce through your youthful anxieties. She continued, a faint smile playing on her lips. As a luxury we can't afford. We have duty. We have the land. We have the Lord. And we have each other. Makes sense for survival. You thought of your own limited experience of affection, but genuine camaraderie with your father, the shared glances of understanding with your mother. These were the bonds that held you, declarations or passionate embraces. The concept of choosing a life partner based on personal attraction, on a shared spark of connection, felt like a fairy tale, a story told to children to lull them to sleep. Your reality was far more grounded and infinitely more constrained. You would marry Agnes, and together you would work the land, raise children, hope that your combined labour would be enough to satisfy the Lord and to see you through another winter. The choices were few. Grayed out was narrow and unyielding. This was the tapestry of your intimate life, woven with threads of obligation and necessity, stark contrast to the freedom of choice you sometimes glimpsed in the distant, imagined lives of the nobility. These realities settled upon you, a quiet, persistent ache. You understood, with a growing certainty, personal decisions were not truly your own. The year 1187 was not just a date on a calendar, testament to a life where individual autonomy was a fragile, often extinguished flame. As the sun dipped below the horizon, sky in hues of bruised purple and fading orange, you knew that tomorrow the work would continue. Quiet acceptance of your fate would be your most constant companion. This monotonous existence would be the continuation of your family line, a duty that, like all others, by forces beyond your control. I've studied paint a picture that's both more mundane and more extraordinary than most people imagine. Romanticize the past, picturing grand feasts and boisterous celebrations. But for the vast majority of a medieval serf was a study in scarcity, especially when it came to amusement. Imagine a world where the highlight of your week was a communal gathering, not a spontaneous party, mind you, but a preordained event to the rhythm of the church calendar or the demands of the Lord. Your existence, often defined by the relentless cycle of labor, tilling the soil, mending fences, offered little in the way of personal diversion. The very concept of free time, as we understand it, A block of hours carved out for personal enjoyment and exploration was a foreign notion. Your hours were dictated by the sun and the seasons. The work was done. Exhaustion was a constant companion. The sheer physical toll of agricultural life, with rudimentary tools and without the benefit of modern mechanization, meant that leisure was often synonymous with recuperation. The world around you evolves, and with it, the subtle ways in which communities sought to break the monotony. Entertainment was a rare and precious commodity woven into the fabric of religious observance and communal necessity. Picture this: crisp autumn afternoon in, say, the year of our Lord 1187, in a small hamlet nestled in the shadow of a minor lord's modest keep. The harvest has been gathered, a meagre bounty after a season of unpredictable rains. The air, scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and the ever-present aroma of livestock carries the murmur of voices. You, as a serf named Thomas, are finishing the final task of the day, storing what little grain remains in the communal granary. Your hands are rough, calloused, and stained with soil. The rough spun tunic you wear, woven from coarse wool, scratches against your skin. Suddenly, a voice calls out, "Thomas! Come!" Priest is gathering the folk by the churchyard. A flicker of anticipation, a rare spark, ignites within you, arriving with his antics, nor a travelling troupe of players. It is Father Michael, his voice resonant and steady. The villagers in a Vespers service. The church, a simple stone structure with a thatched roof, stands as the heart of your world. Dim interior offers a respite from the harsh sunlight and the dust of the fields. Inside is heavy with the scent of beeswax candles and the faint, lingering aroma of incense from earlier services. The others, a somber congregation, finding a spot on the worn flagstones. The murmuring of prayers, of hymns, these are the sounds that fill the silence. For an hour, you are transported not by illusion, but by shared faith. Phrases, though not fully understood, create a rhythmic cadence that soothes the weary mind. You feel a sense of belonging, something larger than your own toil. After the prayers, Father Michael announces the feast day of St. Jude, which falls on the following Thursday. There will be a blessing of the bread and a communal meal, he declares, his gaze sweeping over the assembled faces. Let us give thanks for what we have received. The next few days are marked by a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The usual wariness is tempered by a quiet anticipation. A pale sun struggles to break through the clouds. You, along with your wife Agnes, etched with the same quiet resilience as yours, prepare for the gathering. Manage to save a handful of dried peas from the meagre harvest, and she carefully wraps them in a scrap of linen. Contribution is a few turnips, unearthed from your small garden plot. The communal meal is held in the churchyard. Sturdy oak tree that has stood for generations. A long, rough, hewn wooden table has been set up, the offerings of the villagers. There are loaves of dark, dense bread baked with a mixture of wheat and rye. The smell of freshly baked bread, a rare and comforting aroma, fills the air. There are also bowls of pottage. Whatever vegetables and grains could be spared. The taste is earthy, nourishing, but hardly luxurious. As you sit, simple fare, the priest begins to speak. He recounts the story of St. Jude, a tale of faith and perseverance. Then, surprise, he announces a different kind of entertainment. A young man from a neighboring village, a lad named Peter, known for his skill with a lute, has been invited to play. The lute, an instrument rarely heard, produces a sweet, melodic sound that cuts through the usual drone of daily life. Peter's fingers dance across the strings, coaxing forth simple. The villagers, initially reserved, begin to tap their feet. Some of the younger women exchange shy smiles, yourself humming along to a tune that Agnes remembers from her childhood. The music creates a different kind of connection, a shared experience that transcends the spoken word. It's not grand opera or a theatrical performance, but it is a moment of genuine. You observe the faces around you, the lines of worry softened by the music, the eyes reflecting a fleeting joy. Usually restless, sit captivated. Later, as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, shadows across the churchyard, the gathering begins to disperse. You walk home with Agnes, silence of the evening punctuated by the chirping of crickets. The music still echoes in your mind. It was a good day, Agnes murmurs, her hand finding yours. Your rough fingers intertwine with hers, a silent acknowledgement of the shared experience. Is entertainment for the medieval serf. It's not about spectacle or escapism in the modern sense. It's about community, the rare, precious moments when the harsh realities of life are softened by shared song and simple fellowship. Stark contrast to the constant stream of digital entertainment available today, a reminder of how much we take for granted. The world around you evolves, and as the days turn into weeks, you understand that these communal gatherings, however infrequent, the threads that bind the fabric of your existence, the anchors that prevent the relentless tide of labor from completely eroding the spirit. Respite are often tinged with a sense of obligation, a reminder of your place within the social hierarchy. What happens when these carefully managed moments of communal joy are interrupted? What if something or someone disrupts the expected order, offering a taste of something entirely different, something perhaps even forbidden? Your smartphone weighs more than some of the most precious possessions of this era. Imagine holding it, the cool, smooth glass, solid heft of metal and circuitry. Now, picture your entire worldly wealth reduced to a few rough spun garments, a wooden bowl, sharpened flint. This is the stark reality of your new existence as a serf in 12th century England, say around the year 1150, in a small hamlet nestled in the shadow of a modest manor house, not a grand castle. Sheer weight of your modern knowledge feels like a lead cloak. You know about germ theory, about vaccination, about sanitation. A fever isn't necessarily a sign of demonic possession, and that a cough might not be the harbinger of the Black Death. Particular horror is still centuries away, but this knowledge is useless. It's like possessing the blueprints for a skyscraper when you're stranded on a desert island with only a sharpened shell. Air you breathe thick with the scent of wood smoke, and damp earth carries no invisible guardians. Perspective shifts when you consider the sheer, unyielding power of the unknown. It's not just a philosophical concept, it's a visceral everyday experience. The sky above, a canvas of ever-changing greys and blues, is a source of both sustenance and terror. Period of relentless sun means withered crops, empty granaries, and the gnawing pangs of hunger. A deluge, a relentless downpour, can flood the fields, rot the seeds, and threaten the very foundations of your wattle and daub dwelling. Weather forecasts, no dams, no irrigation systems. You are entirely at the mercy of the heavens. Ping of crickets at dusk, usually a comforting sound, can also be a reminder of the unseen creatures that infest your meager stores, what little you have. The rustling in the nearby woods, the distant howl of a wolf, these aren't just sounds, threats to livestock and sometimes to life itself. You feel a constant, grayed anxiety humming beneath the surface of your daily toil. It's a fear born not of immediate danger, present possibility of it. Consider a simple cut on your hand while working the fields. In your former life, a quick wash with soap and water, perhaps a dab of antiseptic, and you'd be back to normal. Here, that same cut exposed to the dirt, sterilized tools, could fester. It could swell, turn red, and send a burning line of infection up your arm. A fever shiver uncontrollably, and your mind might begin to wander, clouded by the heat. This is where the fear truly takes root. What if this small wound becomes a death sentence? What if your child, playing in the dust, ingests something that sickens them? The nearest healer, if you can even call them that, an old woman who knows a few herbal remedies, her knowledge passed down through generations, mixed with superstition and prayer. She might offer poultices of ground herbs, brewed concoctions, or simply a whispered incantation, as you're painstakingly weaving straw into a rough mat to replace the worn-out one by your sleeping pallet. Agnes approaches, her face, weathered and etched with lines that speak of a hard life, is drawn with worry. Her youngest has been feverish for 2 days. The little one burns. Elsbeth, Agnes whispers, her voice raspy, comes in ragged gasps, and she cries out for her mother, though her eyes don't seem to see me. You look at Agnes, your heart sinking. You know Matilda, a bright, quick-witted child, always eager to help her mother. You can't offer much, no medicine, no advanced knowledge. All you can do is offer a sympathetic ear and a shared burden of fear. Tried the willow bark infusion, Agnes? You ask, remembering a detail from your modern reading about natural painkillers. Perhaps some warm milk with honey, if you have any to spare. Agnes nods, her eyes glistening. I've tried everything I know. Priest from the parish church blessed her yesterday, but the fever remains. The mention of the priest, divine intervention, highlights the desperate measures taken when understanding fails. The church, source of spiritual comfort, could offer no tangible cure for a physical ailment. You recall reading about the limited understanding of human anatomy, even among learned men of the time. Bloodletting was a common practice to balance the humours, but often weakening the patient further. Microscopic organisms was centuries away from being conceived. Later that evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, the sky in hues of orange and purple that seem almost too beautiful for such a troubled world, you sit by your own hearth. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the rough, hewn walls of your dwelling. The smell of burning peat fills the air, a comforting, but it also masks the faint, unsettling scent of dampness and something vaguely organic that clings to the packed earth floor. Cattle from a nearby enclosure and the distant, mournful cry of a barn owl. You try to focus on the warmth of the fire, on the rhythmic mending of a torn tunic, but your mind keeps returning to Matilda. His fears are realized. What if you witness another small life extinguished by something so easily preventable in your own time? Helplessness, this constant awareness of your own vulnerability and the fragility of life, is the pervasive fear of the unknown. The dramatic fear of a dragon or an invading army, though those certainly existed, it's the quieter fear that gnaws at you day after day, the fear of sickness, of hunger, the random cruelties of nature that you have no power to combat. You might have survived the initial shock of arriving here. Without your familiar comforts, you might have even begun to adapt to the physical labor, the rudimentary diet, privacy. But this underlying dread, this constant awareness of how easily everything could be lost, terror of this existence, it's the knowledge that your survival depends on factors entirely beyond your control. Simplest ailment can become a formidable enemy. Your perspective shifts when you consider the lord of the manor. You've only seen him from a distance, a figure on horseback, clad in finer fabrics than you could ever dream of, a different kind of unknown, a source of authority and potential arbitrary power. Heard whispers in the village about his moods, his demands, his justice. He is the ultimate arbiter of your life, dictates the labor you perform, the portion of your harvest he claims, and the punishments for any perceived transgression. The fear of disease and famine is a natural one, born of the environment. The fear of your Lord, however, is a human fear, a fear of capricious will. You wonder, as you try to drift off to sleep on your straw-filled pallet, what the next day will bring. Lord's attention will turn towards your humble dwelling. This precariousness sets the stage for his direct impact, where his decisions, for good or ill, will directly shape your existence. Tonight, experience history not from textbooks, but from the inside, a Lord's arbitrary power pressing down on your very existence. Forget grand battles or the lives of kings. This is about the everyday, the grinding reality of a life dictated by the whims of a man you might never even see. A man whose mood could reshape your entire week, your entire year. You wake up, not to the gentle chime of an alarm, to the damp chill of your wattle, and daub hut, the rough wool of your tunic scratching against your skin. The air, wood smoke, and unwashed bodies clings to you like a second skin. Outside, dawn is just beginning to bleed into the sky, painting the thatched roofs of your village in muted tones. The distant crowing of a rooster, a sound you've grown so accustomed to it's almost a part of your own heartbeat, signals the start of another day. You can hear the gentle snores of your family, a comforting, if slightly unpleasant, the shared space. Your stomach rumbles, a hollow ache that's a constant companion. You reach for your crude wooden bowl, grain cool against your fingertips. The remnants of last night's pottage, barley, and whatever vegetables could be scraped together offer little solace, becomes familiar as you step outside, the cold earth biting at your bare feet. The village of Oak Haven, shadow of Lord Montaigne's imposing stone castle, stirs with a slow, reluctant energy, sharp with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the ever-present aroma of animal dung from the nearby byres. You see Agnes, her face already etched with the weariness of a life lived too hard, tending to a sputtering fire outside her own dwelling. Her hands, gnarled and red from constant work, move with a practiced, almost robotic efficiency. The rough-spun fabric of her dress, a drab brown, blends with the muted colours of the village. A thin plume of smoke curls from her chimney against the vast, indifferent landscape. You nod a greeting, a silent acknowledgement of shared existence. For pleasantries, only the unspoken understanding of the day's demands. The weight of the Lord's expectations is palpable. It hangs in the air like the morning mist, a constant reminder of your place. The Lord's demesne, the fields that are not yours, but which you are bound to work. The path is muddy, barred by the hooves of oxen and the passage of countless feet. The sounds are muted, the lowing of cattle, the bleating of sheep, distant rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer, a sound that normally signifies the creation of tools, but today carries a different weight. Today, the Lord has demanded a new set of iron hinges for his personal hunting lodge. Pulls men from their own fields, men like John, whose wife Elspeth is expecting their third child. John's face, when you pass him on the path, is a mask of weary resignation. He's carrying a heavy sack of grain, his shoulders stooped under the load. Morning, John, you say, your voice raspy from the morning chill. He grunts, not meeting your eyes. Be a morning for the Lord's work, it's a fine enough morning. He pauses, lowering the sack slightly. He's demanding extra tithers this season. For the king's coffers, they say, it's the Lord's hand that reaches into our pockets, ain't it? You nod, the familiar knot of unease tightening in your gut. Something, John, always something. You remember your own small plot of land, the meager crops you've managed to coax from the soil. A portion of that, already harvested, has been set aside for the Lord, a tax on your very survival. Demands are rarely so straightforward. Last month, it was the Lord's falcon, injured and needing a specially crafted perch. It had to be sourced from the forest, a task that fell to William, who spent 3 days away from his own fields. Family's sustenance put at risk. The routine becomes familiar as you join the other serfs in the Lord's fields. Is backbreaking. You are tasked with clearing stones, a never-ending battle against the stubborn earth. The stones are heavy, textured, and cold to the touch. Each one you heave aside feels like a small victory that will be erased by the next rain, the next frost. The sun, when it finally breaks through the clouds, offers little warmth. It beats down on your head, making the sweat bead on your brow and trickle into your eyes, stinging them. The smell of freshly turned earth fills your nostrils, mingled with the sweat of your fellow serfs. You hear the sharp crack of a whip, cry of pain. It's the Lord's reeve, a burly man named Thomas, whose authority is as absolute as his master's. He's punishing a young boy, no older than 10, for resting too long. The boy stumbles, his small frame shaking, and you avert your gaze, pang of helplessness twisting within you. You know that boy's father always shared his meager rations when he could. Now, his son bears the marks of the Lord's displeasure. Later on, the Lord himself, Lord Montaigne, rides out. He's a man of imposing stature, clad in fine wool, lined cloak draped over his shoulders, a stark contrast to the rough-spun garments of the serfs. His horse, beast with a glossy black coat, snorts impatiently. He surveys the work, his gaze sweeping over the labourers. He stops near your group, his eyes, a piercing blue, fix on you for a moment. You feel a prickle of fear, a primal instinct to shrink away. His leather boots crunching on the dry earth. He walks over to a section of fence you've been repairing. Task assigned to you yesterday, he runs a gloved hand along the newly placed stakes. This is not to my satisfaction, he declares, clearly in the still air. The spacing is uneven. You will redo it, and by sunset, your heart sinks, is already beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the fields. Redoing the fence would mean hours of extra labor from your own meager subsistence. You look at the fence, then at the setting sun, a wave of despair washing over you, to protest, to explain that the unevenness is due to the poor quality of the stakes you were given. But the reeve, Thomas, his hand already reaching for his whip. My lord, Thomas says, his voice oily smooth, the serf is clumsy. I will ensure he understands the importance of precision. Lord Montaigne merely nods, his gaze already drifting towards the castle. He turns and mounts his horse, and with a flick of his reins rides away, leaving you and the reeve alone with his arbitrary decree. The smell of horse and expensive leather lingers in the air, a stark reminder of the vast gulf between your worlds. Fellow serfs, their faces mirroring your own despair. There are no appeals, no courts, no rights. Only the Lord's will. By the reeve's whip, you remember reading in a smuggled, tattered fragment of a parchment something about the Magna Carta from far-off England that spoke of limits on royal power. But here, in these lands, Lord Montaigne's power is absolute, as the weather. You begin the arduous task of dismantling and rebuilding the fence, the setting sun mocking your efforts. Wood scrapes against your skin, leaving angry, red welts. The taste of dust and defeat fills your mouth. Rays of sunlight fade. You know that tomorrow will bring more of the same, more of the Lord's whims, more of the soul-crushing monotony. The stars begin to appear cold and distant, offering no comfort, only a vast, silent witness to your unending toil. The routine becomes familiar as you return to your hut, the darkness now complete. The smell of supper, with a few bruised beans, is a meager comfort. You eat in silence, the weight of the day's injustice pressing down on you. Vastness of the Lord's lands, the countless hours of labor that have built his wealth, his comfort, his power, for the privilege of existing on his land, of being his property, subject to his every command, however unreasonable. The sheer unfairness of it all is a heavy burden. You feel a deep weariness, not just of the body, but of the spirit. This constant, displeasing the unseen master, the knowledge that your labor, your very life, is not truly your own, is a slow poison. The sun will rise again, and the cycle will continue. But tonight, as you lie on your straw mattress, fibers scratching your cheek, you can't help but wonder if there's anything more to existence than this. This seemingly endless grind, dictated by the ever-shifting tides of a single man's will, holds your fate in his hands with the casual indifference of someone swatting a fly. And as sleep finally claims you, only hope that tomorrow's whims are less severe than today's. Close your eyes and transport yourself to a time when life moved at a completely different rhythm. Imagine the damp chill that seeps from the packed earth floor of your small wattle and daub dwelling, even on a summer's morning. The air, thick with the scent of wood smoke and unwashed bodies, offers little respite. You stir on your straw-filled pallet, spun wool scratching against your skin. Outside, the first tentative crow of a rooster slices through the pre-dawn stillness, yet still unwelcome, herald of another day. Your stomach rumbles, a hollow ache that has become a constant companion. Reach for your rough tunic, the coarse weave of familiar, abrasive texture against your fingers. Filtering through the single, unglazed opening does little to dispel the gloom. This is your world, a world of relentless sameness, where the horizon stretches no further than the next planting season, the next harvest. This unchanging reality presses down, a palpable force in the quiet of your hut. The rhythm of the seasons dictates your existence, a cycle so unyielding it becomes a form of self-imposed meditation. Caroused and cracked, know the feel of the hoe, the scythe, the rough bark of trees. You are a cog in a vast, slow-moving machine, your purpose defined by the land and the will of your Lord. There is little room for individual aspiration. The church, however, offers a different kind of horizon, a celestial one. On Sundays and feast days, join the villagers in the sturdy stone structure that dominates the small settlement of Oakhaven. In the shadow of Lord Reginald's imposing castle, the air inside the church is cooler, carrying the faint, sweet scent of beeswax, candles, and the lingering, earthy aroma of incense. The stained glass windows, scenes from the Bible in vibrant, jewel-like hues, cast pools of coloured light onto the flagstone floor, a dazzling, alien spectacle in your otherwise muted world. Father Michael, his voice a low rumble that echoes through the vaulted ceiling, delivers his sermon. He speaks of a God who loves you, where suffering ceases and eternal joy awaits. His words, delivered with fervent conviction, are a balm to your weary soul. Your head bowed, trying to absorb the promise of a life beyond this one. where the gnawing hunger and the endless toil will be forgotten. This is your primary solace, your most potent escape. Stories of saints and martyrs, of miracles and divine intervention, a flicker of hope in the overwhelming darkness of your daily existence. You might not understand all the Latin prayers, but the music, the sheer weight of communal faith washes over you, a comforting tide. Agnes, her face etched with the same wariness as yours, nudges your elbow. Her voice is a hushed whisper, barely audible above the murmur of the congregation. Did you hear about Elsbeth's boy? The fever took him in the night, and not titans in your chest. Disease is a constant, silent predator lurking in the shadows. Snatch away the young and the old without warning. The church offers prayers for healing. Reality is often stark and unforgiving. You nod, offering a silent prayer for Elsbeth and her lost child. This shared grief to vulnerability binds you all together in a way that the fields never could. Later, outside the church, after the final benediction, you gather with a few other villagers. The sun, a pale disk in the overcast sky, offers little warmth. William, face drawn, sighs. Or another week, another plea to the Virgin. My youngest still coughs like a dying dog. Thomas, with a perpetual frown, shakes his head. We pray, William, but the Lord's tithes don't lighten, and the harvest looks thin again. God's mercy is a slow thing to arrive. There's a shared understanding in their words, a quiet resignation. They speak of the church's power, but also of its perceived limitations in the face of immediate, tangible hardship. Which offers spiritual sustenance, but it doesn't fill empty bellies or ward off the plague. In the archives of the Benedictine Abbey of St. Swithin in Winchester, a collection of parish records from the late 13th century, documents often written on vellum with quill pens, detail baptisms, marriages, and deaths, a stark reminder of the fragility of life in this era. For instance, entry might record the deaths of 3 children from the same family within a single year, or sweating sickness. These records underscore the profound psychological need for faith, which was not just a place of worship, it was a social hub, a repository of knowledge, albeit limited, and most importantly, a beacon of hope in a world where life was often brutal and short. It provided a framework for understanding suffering, gave meaning to hardship. It was the ultimate psychological safety net, a promise that this earthly existence, tribulations, was not the end. Hours turn to days as the cycle of labor and prayer continues. Your existence is immense, but the promise of salvation, however distant, offers a fragile shield against despair. You focus on the rituals, the familiar chants, the comforting weight of a wooden cross against your chest during times of particular fear. You find yourself humming the hymns as you work, the melodies a persistent undercurrent to the monotonous rhythm of your labor. Saints, particularly those who endured great suffering, become personal parables. You imagine yourself in their place, finding strength through prayer, awaiting your own divine reward. It's a passive hope, a reliance on forces beyond your control, devoid of agency. It is the only hope you have. This reliance on divine intervention, while seemingly passive, required an active engagement with faith, attending services, confessing sins, performing acts of penance, actively participating in the possibility of a better future, even if that future was deferred to the next life. The simple act of attending Mass, the shared experience of singing hymns, splendor of the church interior, these elements provided a stark contrast to the drabness of your daily life. It was an immersion into a different reality, a world of order, beauty, and divine purpose. Psychological escape was crucial for maintaining sanity and preventing utter despair. It allowed individuals to endure the harsh realities of medieval life by focusing on a transcendent hope. Monologue often drifts to the sermon, replaying Father Michael's words, finding new meaning in them as you go about your tasks. You might even whisper a prayer for the Lord of the Manor. Piety translates into a slightly lighter burden for his serfs. As the sun dips below the horizon, shadows across the fields, you return to your hut. The smell of stew, thin and watery, but hot, fills the small space. You eat quickly the rough bread and meager vegetables, doing little to truly satisfy your hunger. Before you sleep, trace the outline of a rough wooden crucifix that hangs above your pallet, its smooth surface worn from countless touches. Your eyes and your dreams often filled with anxieties about the harvest or the Lord's demands. Times punctuated by fleeting visions of celestial choirs and golden streets. Solace you find in the enduring power of faith. Tomorrow the cycle will begin anew, and so too will the gentle, persistent whisper of hope offered by the church. This passive solace, this quiet yearning for a better existence, upon which your resilience is built, preparing you for the unexpected turns that history and your own life might take. Stepping through time into a world that operated by entirely different rules. The chill of the pre-dawn air, a damp, earthy kiss against your exposed face, is your first unwelcome greeting. You stir beneath the rough-spun wool of your pallet, coarse fibers scratching against your skin, a familiar discomfort now. The straw mattress rustles with your movement, a dry, whispery sound that's the only companion in the dim confines of your shared hut. Moonlight, filtered through a gap in the wattle and daub walls, casts skeletal shadows across the packed earth floor. The faint, persistent scent of wood smoke, stale sweat, and something vaguely animalistic, perhaps the pig tethered just outside, hangs heavy. Perfume of peasant existence. Your stomach rumbles, a hollow ache that's become a constant companion, a testament to the meager supper of pottage you consumed hours ago. The silence outside is profound, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl and the rustling of unseen creatures in the nearby woods. Of another day in the year of our Lord 1067, in the small hamlet of O'Cavan, nestled in the shadow of the imposing stone walls of Lord Reginald's manor, the weight of expectation, the sheer, unyielding sameness of it all, presses down on you, with a certainty that chills you more than the morning air, that today will be precisely like yesterday, before that, and the day after. Time moves differently when the rhythm of your existence is dictated by the sun's arc and the dictates of the land. Begins not with the jarring cacophony of an alarm, but with the gradual lightening of the sky, a slow, imperceptible bleed of grey into the oppressive darkness. You rise stiffly, your joints protesting with a series of pops and cracks that echo the weariness in your soul. The rough tunic woven from coarse flax, itchy embrace. You pull on your woolen breeches, tied at the waist with a length of rough cord. Beneath your bare feet is cold and uneven, packed earth that has been trodden by generations before you. Of the hut, your wife, Elspeth, and your two young children, Agnes and Thomas, are still deep in slumber, and even Elspeth's face, usually etched with worry, is momentarily softened by sleep, a pale oval in the gloom. You resist the urge to wake her. The day's labor will claim her soon enough. Stepping outside, the air bites with a bracing chill. The village is still largely asleep, though a few wisps of smoke are already curling from chimneys, signaling the start of the day's fires. The smell of damp earth and decaying leaves is strong. The thatched roofs of the other huts, huddled together like sleeping beasts, brightening sky, you can hear the faint clucking of chickens and the occasional grunt of a pig from its enclosure. Task for today, as for most days, is the endless back-breaking work in the Lord's fields. The autumn harvest is long past, but the land demands constant attention. Today it will be clearing stubble, preparing the soil for the winter follow. As you walk towards the communal well, its stone rim worn smooth by countless hands, you see John, your neighbor, already there, his stooped shoulders visible even in the dim light. He's a man of few words, his life as predictable and arduous as your own. Morning, your voice raspy. He nods, his gaze fixed on the bucket he's drawing. Another day. His voice is a low murmur, devoid of any real emotion. You exchange a few more grunts and nods, the conversation as utilitarian as the tools you'll soon be wielding. Small talk, no idle gossip. Such things are a luxury, a distraction from the relentless grind. You fill your own wooden bucket, icy cold, the rough wood biting into your palms. The weight of the full bucket is a familiar strain. Differently when your interactions are measured and functional. Later, as you toil in the Lord's field, the sun climbing higher, shadows across the turned earth, a flicker of movement catches your eye. A young boy, no older than 8, grunting but perhaps the son of a slightly more prosperous peasant, is making his way towards the edge of the field, clutching a small wooden bird. He hesitates, then, with a surprising burst of boldness, approaches you. "Master," he says, his voice piping, "sent me with this." He proffers the bird, its wings outstretched. It's a simple thing, rough, hewn and unpainted, but to you, in this moment, it's a marvel. You pause, your shovel held mid-air. "For me," you ask, surprised. The boy nods eagerly. He said you fixed his plough last week, and this is his thanks. You take the bird. The wood is smooth beneath your calloused fingers, a stark contrast to the rough texture of your own tools. It's a small gesture, a tiny ripple in the vast ocean of your monotonous existence. Almost feel the boy's father's gratitude, a sentiment rarely expressed in this world. You look at the bird, simple charm, a welcome anomaly. "Tell your father, tell him I thank him," you say, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate, a flash of pure, unadulterated joy, and then darts away, disappearing back towards the village. This brief encounter, this unexpected gift, is a tiny spark in the pervasive gloom. It's not a grand event, not a turning point, but it's something. It's a reminder that even in this life of unceasing toil and predictable hardship, human connection, however small, can still exist. Time moves differently when even the smallest deviation from the norm becomes a significant event. Hold the wooden bird for a moment longer, turning it over in your hands, its smooth surface a comforting sensation. You remember a time, seems, when you two enjoyed carving small figures, a fleeting hobby before the demands of survival consumed all your spare moments. I discovered in archives detailing the meager possessions of a serf from the early 12th century that such small were often the most cherished possessions, valued far more than coin or precious metals, which were, in any case, beyond their reach. This boy's father, a man named William, had a talent for such things, a skill that, in another life, brought him recognition. Here, it was simply a way to repay a small kindness. As the sun begins its descent, sky in hues of orange and purple, you return to your hut. The wooden bird, tucked carefully into your tunic pocket, is already preparing the evening meal, a thin gruel with a few foraged roots. Agnes is playing with a smooth, grey pebble, her face serious with concentration. Thomas is asleep, his small hand curled into a fist. You sit by the hearth, casting a flickering, dancing light. You pull out the bird, showing it to Elsbeth, Her eyes widen slightly of something akin to wonder. It's lovely, she murmurs, her voice soft. You nod, small smile touching your lips. It's a simple thing, a fleeting moment of beauty, a tiny crack in the otherwise impenetrable wall of your existence. It doesn't change the fact that tomorrow will bring the same fields, the same gnawing hunger. But for tonight, holding this small, carved testament to human kindness, you feel a faint, perceptible shift. It's not happiness, not joy, but a quiet acknowledgement that even in the most desolate landscape, something else can occasionally break through. It's a reminder that while the structure of your life is fixed, the occasional, the unexpected interaction can offer a brief, almost imperceptible respite from the overwhelming monotony. This small wooden bird, a whisper from the world of human connection, is a reminder of what lies beyond the confines of your immediate, arduous reality. Possibility, however remote, of a life less predictable. Tomorrow the cycle will undoubtedly continue, but perhaps, just perhaps, the memory of this small gift will make the endless toil just a fraction more bearable. Never quite capture the texture of daily life in this remarkable era. They speak of kings and battles, cathedrals and burgeoning universities. Miss the quiet hum of existence for the vast majority, though the people whose lives were tethered to the soil, tated by the sun and the seasons. You wake up not to the shrill beep of an alarm, but to the muted crow of a rooster. It's called a familiar, almost comforting preamble to another day. The rough wool blanket, scratchy against your cheek, still holds the faint, earthy scent of the stables and the drying herbs hanging from the rafters of your small cottage. The air cool and damp, lingering aroma of wood smoke from last night's meagre fire. Sunlight, a pale, watery gold, filters through the single, painting shifting patterns on the packed earth floor. Your body aches, a dull throb in your lower back from yesterday's hours spent bent over the field, your hands calloused and stained with soil. Single low ceilinged room, its walls of wattle and daubs smelling faintly of damp clay and livestock. A rough hewn table, years of use, sits in the center alongside a couple of stools. A straw-filled mattress, lumpy and smelling of sweat and straw. There are no refinements, no comforts beyond the barest necessities for survival. You pull on your tunic, linen that chafes your skin, and your rough-spun breeches, cinched with a leather thong. The familiar weight of the world, the sheer monotony of it, settles upon you as you prepare for another day. Gradually, that even within this seemingly immutable existence, there are tiny fissures, subtle whispers of discontent. A roaring rebellion, not yet, but a quiet undercurrent of frustration that manifests in small, almost imperceptible ways. You see it in the way Agnes, the baker's wife, pauses a beat too long before handing over the Lord's weekly portion of bread, holding a flicker of something unreadable. You hear it in the hushed conversations that cease abruptly when someone from the manor house, or even a slightly more prosperous farmer, passes by. These aren't grand gestures, but rather the quiet acts of defiance that, when accumulated, the absolute authority of the ruling class. One such moment occurs during the midday meal, sharing a bowl of thin pottage with your neighbor, Thomas, a man whose stoic demeanor usually masks any inner turmoil. Today, however, drifts towards the manor house, a sturdy stone structure perched on a slight rise overlooking the village. William's pig. Thomas asks, his voice low. You shake your head. The reeve took it. He continues, twisting his lips. Said it was for the Lord's larder, but it was a fine pig, fat and healthy. William had been fattening it for months. This is not an uncommon occurrence. The Lord, through his reeve, arbitrary taxes or contributions from the villagers, taking what they pleased when they pleased, of the inescapable burden of serfdom. But this time, there's a different edge to Thomas's voice. William's wife, she's a strong woman. Thomas adds, a hint of admiration in his tone. They say she went to the reeve's house, didn't threaten, just stood there. And when he came out, she asked him, plain and simple, why he took their pig, their food for the winter. Asked him what would happen to their children. You can almost picture the scene, Elsbeth, with worry and a quiet dignity, confronting the reeve. It's a small act, a single voice against the oppressive machinery of the manor, but it's a ripple in the otherwise placid surface of village life. I discovered in the archives of a small monastery near Canterbury a similar account from the late 12th century, how a group of women, their faces veiled, presented a petition to their lord, not demanding rights, but simply asking for fair treatment, for a respite from excessive demands. The petition, penned by a local scribe, stony silence from the Lord, but the act itself, the organized voicing of grievance, was a significant step. Gradually, these small acts of defiance, these quiet conversations, are the true pulse of the community, seeds of a larger awakening, a slow realization that their collective strength, even in its nascent form, is a force to be reckoned with. Later that week, at the village market, a modest affair where villagers traded surplus goods, vegetables and eggs, you overhear another hushed conversation between John and Richard, who usually spend their time fishing in the nearby stream. They are discussing the Lord's latest decree, an additional day of labor on his demesne, the land directly managed by the Lord. It's too much, John mutters. We barely have time to tend our own strips of land as it is. Richard nods, his gaze fixed on the ground. Father remembers when his father spoke of similar times during the reign of King Stephen. Times were hard then too, Tia, but people found ways. He glances around conspiratorially. Some of us are thinking if the reeve comes to tell us to work on Sunday, we'll all be otherwise occupied. A sudden illness, perhaps, or a necessary pilgrimage to the church. The mention of a pilgrimage as an excuse for avoiding labor is a common enough ruse. So of a coordinated effort of multiple villagers feigning illness or religious devotion simultaneously is a new development. It's a subtle form of passive resistance, a way to push back against the Lord's demands without resorting to outright confrontation. This echoes a historical trend where the church, pillar of the feudal system, also offered a sanctuary and a framework for communal action that could, in subtle ways, secular authority, the very act of attending Mass, of gathering together under the benevolent gaze of God, opportunities for communication and solidarity that the Lord's overseers found difficult to penetrate. The air in the village, usually thick with the smell of manure and damp earth, seems to carry a new, almost imperceptible scent, the scent of shared purpose, of a burgeoning awareness that their collective silence had a power of its own. Even the children, simple games of tag and chase in the dusty lane, seemed to sense the shift. Their laughter, usually unrestrained, punctuated by hushed whispers, their games mirroring the quiet resistance they witness in their parents, stirring within you a faint echo of that same nascent defiance. It's not a burning desire for revolution, but a quiet yearning for something more, for a life where their labor is not entirely consumed by the demands of others. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, you look towards the manor house, no longer with a sense of resigned acceptance, but with a flicker of something akin to hope. The seeds of rebellion, however small, been sown, and tomorrow, you suspect those seeds might begin to sprout. The simple act of shared grievance, whispered solidarity, is the fragile beginning of something that could, in time, change everything. Drift back to an age when the very concept of normal was radically different, a time when the slow turning of the seasons dictated existence far more than any ticking clock. Imagine, if you will, the year of our Lord 1345, unremarkable year in the grand tapestry of European history, yet for you, it would be the very fabric of your days. King surveying his domain from a stone parapet, nor a knight polishing his mail before a tourney. You are a serf, tethered to the land, your life a predictable cycle of sowing, tending, and reaping, all under the watchful gaze of the local lord, and, of course, the omnipresent church. The dawn, as it always did, painted the eastern sky in muted shades of grey and rose. You stirred on your straw-stuffed mattress, the rough wool of your tunic scratching against your skin. The air in the small, room wattle and daub cottage was thick with the mingled scents of stale hearth, smoke, sleeping bodies, and the faint aroma of damp soil that clung to everything. Beside you, Agnes, your wife, breathed softly, her face etched with the day's weariness. Your eldest daughter, a girl of 10 with eyes too old for her years, slept curled on a smaller pallet by the wall. Little Thomas whimpered in his sleep, a common occurrence. You swung your legs over the side of the mattress, your bare feet meeting the packed earth floor. The chill seeped into your souls, a familiar, unwelcome sensation. Outside, early morning chorus of roosters began, a sound that signaled not opportunity, but the commencement of another day's relentless toil. You pulled on your worn leather breeches and a simple linen shirt, the coarse fibers a constant reminder of your station. Breakfast, if one could call it that, was a hunk of coarse rye bread, hard as a stone, and a sliver of salted fish washed down with a draught of thin. It was sustenance, nothing more. Stepping out of the cottage, the village of Oakhaven slowly came into focus. The thatched roofs of the other dwellings, huddled together like a flock of sheep, seemed to sag under the weight of the morning mist. Damp and carried the distinct odor of animal dung from the nearby byre, a pungent, inescapable perfume was dominated by the imposing stone structure of St. Michael's Church, its steeple a stark, upward thrust against the pale sky, visual testament to the power of God, and the church beyond the village, stretching out in all directions, vast fields of barley and wheat, your life's work and your Lord's profit. You joined the other men of Oakhaven. Silent, shuffling procession towards the communal fields. There was no boisterous camaraderie, no spirited debate about the day's tasks. A man whose face was as weathered and furrowed as the ploughed earth grunted a greeting. Richard, perpetually hunched and thin. William, younger and still possessing a flicker of something akin to hope in his eyes, managed a weak smile. The men you saw every day, their lives as predictable and monotonous as your own. You knew their families, their small joys and their quiet sorrows, but there was little room for deep connection when survival was the constant, gnawing concern. As decreed by the reeve was weeding the barley field, it was back-breaking work, forgiving gaze of the sun. Your knees ached, your back screamed in protest, and your hands, calloused and scarred, practiced unthinking efficiency. You bent, plucked and tossed, the endless rows of green stalks blurring before your eyes. Sounds were the gentle rustle of the barley, the occasional chirp of a bird, and the rhythmic thud of hoes on the earth. As the sun climbed higher, a subtle shift occurred. A distant cry sharper than the usual sounds of the village, pierced the air, a sound of alarm, a sound that rarely punctuated the monotony of your existence. Heads lifted from their labors. The reeve, a burly man named Robert, squinted towards the north, a plume of dark smoke, unnatural and stark against the blue sky, was rising from the direction of the woods that bordered the Lord's forest. Slowly but surely, a ripple of unease spread through the field. This was not the usual rhythm of life. Smoke from the woods usually meant a hunter, or perhaps a charcoal burner. But this was different. The smoke was too dense, too dark. Whispers began to circulate, hushed and fearful. What could it be? John muttered, his eyes wide. Richard ventured, his voice trembling. William, ever the observer, pointed. "Look, there are riders!" Indeed, on horseback were now visible, silhouetted against the distant tree line, a speed and urgency that was utterly alien to the slow, plodding pace of village life. The reeve, his face grim. The men dropped their tools, a sudden, frantic energy replacing the earlier lethargy. You felt a prickle of fear, a sensation that was a stranger to your usual dull acceptance. This was an event, a deviation from the predictable humdrum. You looked towards Agnes, who had come to the edge of the field, her face pale, clutching Elsbeth and Thomas. Eyes were fixed on the approaching riders, innocence a stark contrast to the dawning apprehension on the faces of the adults. The riders, when they drew closer, were not bandits, men at arms. They were messengers, their horses lathered, their tunics stained with dust and sweat. One of them, a young man with a desperate look in his eyes, reined his horse to a halt before the reeve. "The king's writ?" he gasped, fumbling in a pouch at his saddle. He unfurled a parchment, his voice ragged as he began to read. The words, though distant, mistakable weight. Plague. A sickness spreading from the east. It was coming. Gasp went through the assembled villagers. Plague itself was a chilling echo of tales whispered by the priest during sermons. Stories of divine retribution and widespread death was not a minor disruption. This was a seismic shift. The monotonous, boring life you knew was about to be irrevocably altered. Decree from the Lord, but by an unseen, unstoppable force. The familiar scent of damp earth and animal dung suddenly seemed fragile, whelmed by the unseen threat now bearing down upon Oakhaven. The sheer boredom that had defined your existence was about to be replaced by a far more visceral, terrifying awareness. Quiet fear that had always lurked in the shadows of your mind was now stepping into the harsh light of day. You found yourself looking at Agnes, her hand now tightly gripping Elsbeth's. The familiar rhythm of your days had been shattered by a single terrifying pronouncement, and the implications vast and unknown, like a dark banner in your mind. This unforeseen event, this whisper of a distant pestilence, rewrite the very definition of normal for everyone in Oakhaven. Slowly but surely, vacations of this news began to sink in, a chilling premonition of the profound upheaval that lay ahead. An upheaval that would shatter the predictable monotony and introduce a terrifying new element of uncertainty into your already challenging existence. Fabric of your boring life was about to be tested in ways you could never have imagined. In the quiet of your room, let's step into a world where silence had different meanings. It wasn't the absence of noise, but a heavy that often preceded either the dawn of another monotonous day or the sharp crack of authority. You, on the estate of Lord de Montfort in the year of our Lord 1348, knew this silence intimately. The air, deepest part of the night, carried the faint, earthy scent of damp straw and wood smoke. reminder of your humble dwelling. Outside, the wind whispered through the skeletal branches of the oak trees bordering the village that usually lulled you to sleep, but tonight stirred a restless unease. You'd heard whispers, hushed and furtive, passed between the meager huts after the evening meal of watery gruel and tough rye bread, whispers of a plan, desperate gamble born from the gnawing hunger and the ever-present weight of obligation. Differently, when the horizon of your life is fixed by the boundaries of your Lord's land. For weeks, the murmurs had grown around the figure of Thomas, a man whose quiet desperation had finally ignited into a spark of rebellion. Beyond the forest of freedom, of a place where a man might keep the fruits of his own labor. You'd seen the longing in his eyes, mirroring your own, and the shared glances between you and Agnes' placid face etched with a newfound tension. The previous day, during the communal weeding of the Lord's turnip field, Thomas had subtly pressed a small, crudely carved wooden bird into your palm. It was a signal, a silent agreement to meet at the old, disused shepherd's hut on the edge of the woods just before dawn. The risk was immense. Discovery meant severe punishment, branding or banishment to the Lord's most unforgiving lands. Yet, the thought of another year, another decade, relentless cycle, sunrise to sunset, toil for another's gain was a suffocating prospect. Weave of your woolen tunic against your skin, a familiar, scratchy comfort that tonight felt like a cage. The coarse wool, brown with walnut husks, was typical of serf attire, practical but devoid of any ornamentation. Candle you'd lit, its flame flickering precariously, cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock your clandestine hopes. On your straw-filled pallet, the scent of dried herbs mixed with the inherent mustiness of the bedding filling your nostrils. Your heart hammered against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive quiet. You could hear the shallow breathing of Agnes beside you, a soft, rhythmic sound that was usually comforting but now amplified your own anxiety. You imagined the scene at the shepherd's hut. Thomas, John and William, their faces grim in the pre-dawn gloom, the air thick with anticipation and fear. You recalled a conversation with Agnes earlier that evening, barely a whisper as she mended a torn sack by the dying embers of their small hearth. Spoke of a place, she'd murmured, her needle pausing, where the soil is richer, is not so heavy. You'd nodded, your own voice equally hushed. But the journey, Agnes, it's dangerous. The Lord's men patrol the borders. She'd met your gaze, her eyes reflecting the faint firelight. This life, my dear, to live and die without ever tasting true freedom. Her words, spoken with a tremor, had resonated deeply within you. You'd also remembered a brief, forgotten encounter with a traveling merchant a few seasons ago. He'd spoken of towns far to the south and commerce, where men were free to ply their trades. He'd even shown you a small, intricately woven silk ribbon, a splash of vibrant color against the muted tones of your world, that memory, a fleeting glimpse of a different existence, a seed of hope, now nurtured by Thomas's desperate plan. Time moves differently when the weight of expectation presses down on every waking moment. You slipped out of your pallet, the straw rustling softly, the floorboards, rough-hewn and uneven, creaked beneath your bare feet. You pulled on your tunic and rough-spun breeches, the familiar garments feeling alien in their purpose. You needed to gather provisions, dried peas and a hunk of hard cheese pilfered from the communal stores. Being caught even within your own dwelling was a constant, low-level hum of dread towards the small wooden chest where you kept your meager possessions. Inside, A spare pair of worn leather shoes and a small, smooth stone you'd found by the river was a small crucifix. It had belonged to your mother, a woman who had endured her life with quiet resignation. You clutched it for a moment, its cool metal a stark contrast to the warmth of your palm. "Grant me courage," you whispered, swallowed by the silence. You recalled your father's words from years ago, spoken as he lay on his deathbed, life that had swept through the village the previous winter. He'd coughed, his breath ragged. Never forget, he'd rasped, his eyes clouded with pain, that even in the darkest night, the stars still shine. His words, a simple truth, felt like a powerful incantation against the encroaching despair. You reached the edge of the village, the huts huddled together like sleeping beasts. The air was colder here, the silence more profound. Clutched tightly in your hand felt like a fragile promise. As you approached the designated meeting point, a faint flicker of light caught your eye. It was the shepherd's hut, a dilapidated structure of wattle and daub, its thatched roof sagging. You slowed your pace, your senses on high alert. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves was stronger here. You could hear the rustle of movement from within the hut. Was it Thomas and the others, or had the Lord's Reeve, named Giles with a perpetually scowling face, somehow anticipated their plan? Your heart leaped into your throat, yourself against the rough bark of a nearby oak tree, its texture coarse and unyielding against your cheek. Then a voice, and urgent, cut through the stillness. "Who goes there?" It was Thomas. Relief washed over you, so potent it made your knees weak. You stepped out from behind the tree, raising the wooden bird as a signal. Time moves differently when the fabric of your reality begins to unravel. As you approached a hut, you saw Thomas, John, huddled together, their faces illuminated by a single, sputtering lantern, mixture of grim determination and palpable fear. Agnes was already there, her small bundle of provisions at her feet. Thomas breathed, his voice tight with relief. We thought you might have been taken." John, wide, anxious eyes shifted his weight. The Reeve was seen near the south fields earlier. He muttered towards the dark expanse of the woods. He seemed watchful. William, sturdier and more taciturn, merely nodded, his hand resting on the handle of a stout wooden club. "We must go now," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Before the sky begins to lighten." You joined them, the small group, a fragile beacon against the vast, indifferent darkness, was thick with the metallic tang of fear. You exchanged a glance with Agnes, silent acknowledgement of the precipice upon which you stood. "Are we sure about this?" you whispered, hanging heavy in the air. "The Lord's forest is vast, and his men are many." Thomas met your gaze, an intensity that belied his usual quiet demeanor. "We have no other choice," he stated, his voice firm. "A slow death. We deserve more. We vow more." He gestured towards the dark, imposing wall of trees. "Lies a chance for something other than endless toil and hunger." He spoke of the ancient laws of the land, customary rights that were being eroded by the increasingly rapacious demands of their lord. He'd even recalled a fragment of a story, down generations, about a time when serfs were not bound to the land in perpetuity, a time when they could move freely, their labor to the highest bidder. This historical tidbit, a whisper from the past, fueled their desperate hope, faint echo of a forgotten freedom, a counter-narrative to the suffocating reality of their present. Time moves differently when the known path is abandoned for the unknown. As they prepared to move, a sudden, sharp sound pierced the night. unmistakable baying of hounds, a cold dread far more potent than any fear you'd felt before, seized you. Giles, been watchful. The sound grew closer, a terrifying crescendo of barks and the crashing of undergrowth. Panic flared. Thomas grabbed your arm. "Run," he yelled, his voice hoarse.
"Scatter!"
"Old oak by the river, if you can." The lantern was dropped, plunging the immediate vicinity into darkness. You stumbled, the rough ground catching your feet. You could hear shouts, the heavy thud of running feet, and the relentless pursuit of the hounds. Beside you, her hand gripping yours tightly, her breath coming in ragged gasps, you plunged into the denser part of the woods, tearing at your clothes and skin. The scent of pine needles and damp earth filled your lungs, primal aroma that spoke of both refuge and danger. You risked a glance back. Through the trees, you saw the bobbing lights of torches, of men on horseback, and the terrifying, distorted forms of the hounds. You ran, your lungs burning, your legs aching. Pursuit was relentless. You could hear the heavy breathing of Agnes close by, her presence a small comfort in the overwhelming chaos. Seeing a narrow ravine a short distance from the shepherd's hut, a treacherous but potentially concealing passage, pulling Agnes towards it. You scrambled down the steep embankment, the loose soil giving way beneath your feet. Baying seemed to recede slightly as you plunged deeper into the gully, but the shouts of the men remained terrifyingly close. You could hear the jingle of harnesses, the creak of leather, the harsh commands of Giles. You pressed yourselves against the damp, covered rock face, the cold seeping through your thin tunics. You could smell the rich, dark earth, the decaying leaves, and the faint, musky scent of the wild animals that called this place home. The flickering torchlight, visible from above, cast eerie patterns on the ravine walls, making it impossible to discern the exact location of your pursuers. The history books you knew would likely record this as a failed escape, a foolish act of defiance met with swift and brutal justice. But in this moment, in the Earth's embrace, the only history that mattered was the desperate struggle for survival, the raw fight for a sliver of freedom that had, for a few fleeting hours, seemed within reach. Differently, when the dream of escape clashes with the brutal reality of the system, continued for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, the sounds of pursuit began to fade, replaced by the mournful hoot of an owl and the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. You and Agnes, along with John and William, had managed to evade immediate capture, but the cost was evident. John's arm was bleeding, a deep gash from a thorn bush. Face was streaked with dirt and a grim, defeated wariness. Thomas, however, was nowhere to be seen. A chilling fear gripped you. Had he been caught? Had he sacrificed himself to allow the others to escape? You, through the night, had curdled into a bitter, gnawing dread. The woods' pathway to freedom now felt like a trap, a labyrinth from which there was no easy exit. Break, painting the eastern sky in hues of pale grey and rose, stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped your hopes. You looked at Agnes, her face pale and drawn, reflecting the dawning light with a profound sadness. The weight of your failure settled upon you, heavy and suffocating. The system, understood with a crushing finality, was not merely the Lord or his men. It was the very land, the very air, the very structure of this medieval existence designed to keep you bound. Differently, when the consequences of defiance begin to manifest, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, distorted shadows, you knew you could not remain hidden forever. The sounds of the hounds, though distant, still a chilling reminder of the danger. You made your way back towards the village with the hopeful anticipation of the previous night, but the heavy resignation of those who had tasted freedom only to have it snatched away. The village green, bustling with activity by this hour, was eerily quiet. You saw a small group gathered near the Lord's manor house, bowed in somber discussion. A knot of dread tightened in your stomach. As you drew closer, you saw Giles the Reeve, his arms crossed, his face a mask of cold authority. Beside him, tied to a wooden post, was Thomas. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, but his eyes, when they met yours, held a flicker of defiance that even this ordeal could not extinguish. The wooden bird which you had dropped in your flight lay at his feet. The magnitude of their failure, the brutal retribution that followed, was a stark, undeniable lesson, a chilling affirmation of the suffocating reality of your life. You realized with a profound sense of despair that the quiet of your room was a luxury, a brief respite before the inevitable return to the monotonous, inescapable rhythm of your existence. Your gaze shifted to Agnes, hand finding yours, her touch a silent testament to shared hardship and a future that, for now, remained bleakly predictable. The sun, higher in the sky, offered no warmth, only the harsh illumination of your defeat. Most people think they understand this historical period, but nothing could be further from the truth. The romanticized notions of chivalry and valiant knights often overshadow the stark reality for the vast majority of the population. For you, in this 13th century English village, the truth is 1,000 times more mundane and infinitely more crushing. The dawn, pale grey light seeping through the cracks in your wattle and daub hut, doesn't bring anticipation, but a familiar weary dread, smell of damp earth, wood smoke, and the ever-present underlying tang of animal waste presses down on your lungs. Filled mattress scratches against your coarse woolen tunic, a constant reminder of your station. Outside, the first tentative crow of a rooster is answered by the lowing of cattle, the bleating of sheep, and the distant, rhythmic thud of an axe felling wood. This is the symphony of your existence, a monotonous repetition that has been the soundtrack to your life since you were a child and will remain so until your last breath. The simple act of rising from your pallet is an effort, your muscles stiff and aching from yesterday's labor in the Lord's fields. Grit of the dirt floor on your bare feet as you step out of bed, the chill seeping into your bones. Your perspective shifts when you consider the recent events, the whispers, the hushed conversations in the shadow of the church nave, glances exchanged between villagers. It all coalesces into a chilling understanding of what happened to Thomas. His crime, a simple refusal to hand over a portion of his meager harvest to the Reeve, a man whose greed seemed to know no bounds. Thomas, a man you'd known your entire life, a man who had shared his last crust of bread with you during the lean winter of 1315. Question the fairness of the Lord's demands. It wasn't an outright rebellion, not a gathering of pitchforks and torches. Quiet, dignified refusal, a plea for leniency. And for that, he was gone. You remember seeing the Lord's men, leather jerkins and carrying stout cudgels, arrive at Thomas's small cottage. The muffled sounds of a struggle, the sharp cry that was quickly silent, the grim procession as they dragged him away. These memories are etched into your mind like the furrows in the field. There was no trial, just the swift, brutal assertion of authority. The Lord, Baron Fitzwilliam, you'd only ever seen from a distance, a stern, unyielding visage framed by expensive furs, had made an example. Was clear obedience, absolute and unquestioning, was the only path to survival. Your perspective shifts when you step outside your hut and see Agnes, her face etched with worry, already tending to her small patch of herbs. She looks up as you approach, her eyes meeting yours with a shared understanding of the unspoken fear that permeates the village. "Did you hear?" she whispers, her voice barely audible above the morning sounds. "They say Thomas tried to hide some of the grain." She shakes her head, a gesture of both disbelief and resignation. "It's what they'll say, isn't it?" Justified. You nod, the taste of bile rising in your throat. The official explanation, no doubt, far removed from the truth. Thomas, a man who had always shared his bounty, had helped you repair your roof after the storm of a 22, would be painted as a thief, a rebel. "It doesn't matter what they say, Agnes." You reply, your voice rough. "What matters is what we know. He was a good man." Elsbeth, her youngest child clinging to her skirts, approaches them, cheerful demeanor replaced by a somber quiet. "My little William," she says, her voice trembling. Where Thomas had gone, he loved Thomas's stories. The raw pain in her voice is a physical blow. You remember Thomas, the way he'd let the children sit on his lap and tell them tales of dragons and brave knights, seemed so distant and unreal now. Your perspective shifts when you consider the immediate consequences for the rest of the village. The Lord's men remained for a full day after Thomas's disappearance, their presence a constant of their master's power. They inspected every hut, every storehouse, their eyes sharp and unforgiving, skated any grain that was deemed excessive, leaving families with barely enough to see them through the coming weeks. Palpable fear was a physical entity, a cold hand gripping the heart of the community. You recall the humiliation of watching them take the few extra eggs you had managed to gather, the small sack of dried peas you had set aside for a special occasion. It wasn't just the loss of the food, it was the violation, respect for your meager possessions, your hard-won sustenance. The Lord's justice, or rather, his punishment, was not about fairness, it was about dominance. It was about reinforcing the absolute hierarchy from the Lord in his distant castle, his horse down to you, kneeling in the dirt, your life dictated by their whims. I discovered in the parish records of a decree from this very period, hoarding foodstuffs, a broad term that could encompass anything from a few extra loaves of bread to a small store of grain, clear to keep everyone perpetually on the edge of desperation, making them more compliant, less likely to contemplate defiance. Your perspective shifts when you think about your own life, stripped bare of any illusion of agency, cog in a vast, unfeeling machine. Your days are a blur of repetitive tasks, plowing the Lord's fields, sowing his seeds, his crops, all under the watchful eye of the reeve. Your hands, roughened and calloused, are your only tools, aches constantly, a dull, persistent throb. The food you eat is simple and monotonous, coarse bread, vegetables are available, and occasionally, if you're fortunate, a bit of salted fish. The taste is bland, gritty. Your clothing, a simple tunic and breeches made of rough wool, is scratchy against your skin. Same garments day in and day out, washing them only when they become truly unbearable. The concept of leisure, personal enjoyment, is a luxury you cannot afford. Even your evenings are spent repairing tools, mending clothes, simply collapsing onto your straw pallet, too exhausted to do anything else. There are no books to read, no music to listen to, art to admire. Your world is confined to the rhythms of the seasons and the demands of your Lord. Quiet contemplation. It is a life of relentless toil, a slow existence that offers little hope for improvement. Your perspective shifts when you consider the sheer monotony of it all might sweep through, or a skirmish might erupt on the borders. For the vast majority of people, life was a predictable cycle of labor. The seasons dictated everything. Spring meant planting, summer meant tending the crops, autumn meant harvesting, it meant survival. There were no holidays, no vacations, no weekends. Every day was a work day. Even the church festivals, offering a brief respite from labor, observed with a mixture of religious duty and the practical necessity of not angering the church itself, which held significant power and land. The vast majority of the population, the estimated 80–90% who were serfs, that were remarkably similar to each other, regardless of whether they lived in Kent or Yorkshire. Their world was small. Concerns immediate the next meal, the threat of illness, the demands of the Lord. As the sun climbs higher, shadows across the village green, a sense of profound weariness settles over you. Thomas's fate hangs heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the precariousness of your existence. At Agnes and Elsbeth, their faces reflecting the same quiet resignation that has become the hallmark of your community. Men are gone, but their presence lingers, a chilling testament to the absolute nature of power. Tomorrow, you will rise again to the fields, your hands shaking slightly as you grasp your scythe. The cycle continues, unbroken, unyielding. The question that gnaws at you, however, is not if you will endure, but dive why. What purpose does this endless, soul-crushing labor serve? Contemplate this. A new thought begins to form, a dangerous seed of curiosity, a question about the very nature of your reality, which will breathing slows as we prepare to explore what life truly meant in another time, when the grand narratives of kings and battles often obscured the quiet, enduring reality of the majority. Forget the shimmering armor and the triumphant trumpets for a moment. We are delving into the earth, into the sweat and the profound, unyielding sameness that defined the lives of those who tilled the land. The air in your small is thick with the scent of damp straw, stale urine, and the lingering aroma of yesterday's meager turnip stew. Outside, dawn sky is a bruised, indeterminate grey, canvas against which the equally familiar sounds of the village are beginning to stir. The lowing of a cow, a dog's mournful bark, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. These are the notes of your world, a symphony of the mundane. Wool blanket tighter around your shoulders, the scratchy fibers, a constant, low-grade irritation against your skin. Into your bones, a damp, pervasive cold that no amount of firelight truly banishes. You recall the fleeting moments of rebellion, the whispers of escape, the desperate, naive hope that perhaps, just perhaps, destined for something more. Subpart 18 offered a glimpse of a minor disruption in the vast ocean of your existence, perhaps a stray dog that momentarily captured your attention, Drunt's sunset that painted the sky with colors you'd never seen before. Then, in Part 19, we explored a failed attempt to break free, a shared dream with Elsbeth of finding a hidden path, a secret route away from the manor, dissolved into the crushing reality of the surrounding forest, dense and unforgiving. And Subpart 20 detailed the swift consequence of even the smallest transgression, the public shaming for pilfering a loaf of bread, of the iron grip of Lord de Valois and his laws enforced by men like Thomas. The reeve shadow loomed large over your existence. But today, a different kind of understanding settles upon you, and more profound than any fear of punishment. It's a quiet, internal surrender. You rise from your straw pallet, protesting with a familiar stiffness. The floorboards beneath your bare feet are cold and uneven. By generations of bare feet, just like yours. You look at your hands, calloused, cracked, stained with the earth of a serf. They are not meant for wielding a quill, nor for crafting intricate sculptures, nor for commanding armies. The plough, for the scythe, for the relentless, back-breaking labor that feeds the lords and the church, and by extension, sustains your own meager existence. The desire for something more, the yearning for a different life, has been a persistent ember within you. You'd imagined yourself as a skilled craftsman in a bustling town, or perhaps a scribe, deciphering ancient texts in the hushed quiet of a monastery. You'd even harbored a foolish fantasy of riding with the knights. You knew, even then, that your place was firmly in the dirt. You remember a conversation with Agnes, with the same wary resignation you now feel. "Why do we do this?" you'd asked her one sweltering afternoon as you both toiled in the wheat fields, the sun beating down relentlessly. Insects and the scent of ripe grain was almost suffocating. Agnes paused, sweat from her brow with the back of her forearm, leaving a smear of dirt. Her worn linen tunic, patched in several places, thing, frame. "We do it because we must, child," she'd said, her voice raspy. "Our fathers did it, and their fathers before them. Things Lord de Valois has his obligations, and we have ours. We owe him our labor, our lives, and he, in turn, provides us with his protection." She gestured vaguely towards the distant, imposing silhouette of the manor house, a stark contrast to the humble dwellings of the village. "But is that all there is?" You'd pressed, evident in your voice. "Just this. Ploughing, sowing, reaping, yeah." You recalled seeing a travelling merchant earlier that week, goods from distant lands, brightly coloured silks, exotic spices, intricate metalwork. He spoke of cities, bustling markets, of lives lived beyond the confines of your village. Agnes sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "Who seek to change the way of things, as you call it," she admitted, flickering nervously towards the path that led to the Reeves cottage. "But those paths are fraught with peril. Remember what happened to William when he tried to claim that patch of land by the stream as his own. Men, they made an example of him." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It is better to keep your head down, to do your work, grateful for what little you have. The Lord in heaven knows our struggles, and he will reward us in the next life." Her words, a source of frustration, now resonated with a chilling truth. You looked at the fields stretching out before you, same fields you'd worked since you were old enough to carry a small hoe. The soil was rich, dark, smelled of the earth's deep secrets, a scent that had once held a certain allure, but now spoke only of endless toil. You'd read fragment of a manuscript found near the church ruins, a fragment that spoke of Roman agricultural techniques, of crop rotation and irrigation, that there were better ways to work the land. But those were the dreams of scholars, the reality of serfs bound to the land by unwritten, yet unbreakable chains. The world around you evolves, not in grand leaps and bounds, but in the slow, inexorable turning of the seasons. The vibrant green of spring gives way to the golden hues of summer, browns of autumn, and finally the stark white of winter. Each cycle brings its own set of labours, its own predictable rhythm. Quiet despair. You are a cog in a vast, ancient machine, a machine that has been grinding on for centuries, long after you are gone. You walk towards the communal well, the rough-hewn wooden bucket heavy in your hand. Drawn from deep within the earth is cold and pure, a small comfort. As you pour it into your wooden bowl, the familiar taste is both grounding and deeply disheartening. It is the taste of your life, unchanging, unyielding. you see John, his face a mask of weariness, already heading towards the fields. You exchange a nod, silent acknowledgement of your shared fate. There are no grand pronouncements of destiny here, no heroic quests to undertake. Sun, the soil, and the ever-present certainty of tomorrow's labor, the internal struggle, fight against the limitations of your birth, begins to subside. It's not a sudden, dramatic event, but a slow fading, burning down to its last flicker. The energy that fueled your dreams, your hopes of escape, is simply gone. A quiet acceptance, a profound understanding that this is your lot. This is the life you were born into, you will live and die in. It is a chilling realization, a surrender not of defeat, but of a hard-won, albeit sorrowful, unchangeable. Your perspective shifts when you finally stop fighting the current and simply float. In the quiet of your hut, as the first rays of dawn begin to paint the sky, you accept the scratchy wool, the damp straw, cycle of labor. You accept that your story is not one of grand adventure, but of quiet endurance. You are a serf, that is your truth. The world around you evolves, and with this acceptance, a different kind of peace, a somber peace, begins to settle. It's the peace of knowing what to expect, of no longer fighting a battle that cannot be won. This quiet resignation, understanding of your unchangeable existence sets the stage for what comes next. Subtle ways in which, even in the most monotonous of lives, the human spirit finds a way to endure, to adapt, and to simply be. Has that one period that captures their imagination completely. This is mine. For me, it's not the clang of swords on battlements, nor the whispered intrigues of royal courts, but the quiet, relentless rhythm of agrarian life in the 13th century. A world where the most exciting event of the year might be the arrival of the travelling tinker, or the bishop's annual visitation. Heart of the most boring life imaginable, the life of a medieval serf, so devoid of dramatic flair that it often slips through the cracks of grand historical narratives. We've seen attempts at change, at defiance, and we've witnessed the swift, often brutal, reassertion of the established order. Now, we return to the fundamental, the unchanging, the bedrock of this existence. The year is 1257, and the air in the village of Oakhaven, nestled in the rolling hills of Wessex, is thick with the familiar scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and the ever-present aroma of livestock, the gentle chime of an alarm, but to the insistent crow of a rooster, its strident cry cutting through the pre-dawn chill. Spun wool of your tunic scratches against your skin, a constant low-grade irritation. The straw-filled mattress beneath you offers little comfort, its rustling a familiar sound as you shift. The low-ceilinged cottage, constructed of wattle and daub, is a single room shared with your family, and heavy with the lingering smell of yesterday's stew. A single smoky hearth provides the only light, casting flickering shadows on the rough-hewn wooden beams. Your hands, calloused and cracked from endless labor, wooden bowl of pottage waiting by the hearth. It's a thin gruel of barley, perhaps with a few wilted greens if you're fortunate. The taste is bland, utilitarian, designed to fuel the body, not to delight the senses. Outside, the village is slowly stirring, the rhythmic thud of an axe splitting wood, the lowing of cattle being driven to pasture, bleating of sheep. These are the sounds that punctuate the dawn. There's no leisurely breakfast, no contemplation of the day's possibilities. The sun, a pale disk peeking over the eastern horizon, is your clock, the commencement of labor. Today, like most days, is dedicated to the Lord's fields. You join your neighbors, shuffling procession towards the manor lands. Agnes, her face etched with lines deeper than her years, walks beside you, slow and steady. "Heard the Lord's Reeve was asking after young Thomas yesterday," she mutters, her voice raspy, something about him being seen near the woods again. You nod, a familiar knot of unease tightening in your stomach. The Reeve, overseer, is a constant presence, his hawk-like gaze missing nothing. The fields stretch out before you, a vast expanse of brown earth waiting to be tilled. The plough, a heavy, cumbersome tool by a pair of oxen whose breath steams in the cool air. Your task is to guide the plough, ensuring a straight furrow. Simple act that requires immense physical strength and unwavering concentration. The soil is heavy, resistant, the plowshare with a stubborn tenacity. The muscles in your back and legs scream in protest, becomes a constant companion. The sun climbs higher, its warmth a welcome, but also a draining presence, trickles down your brow, stinging your eyes, and you wipe it away with the back of your rough sleeve. As the seasons change, the work shifts, but the monotony remains. In spring, it's the back-breaking labor of sowing seeds, scattering them with a practiced spy hand. The hope for a good harvest is a fragile thing, easily dashed by a late frost or a summer drought. In summer, weeding, pulling up the invasive plants that threaten to choke the precious crops. The air hums with the drone of insects, irritating soundtrack. The heat can be oppressive, the sun beating down relentlessly, leaving you dizzy and parched. In autumn, the harvest arrives, a period of frantic activity, against time to bring in the grain, before the rains turn the fields into a muddy quagmire. The threshing, the winnowing, are back-breaking tasks performed with the same wary resignation. Then comes winter. The fields lie fallow, does not cease. There's firewood to be gathered, tools to be mended, livestock to be tended to in the cramped, smoky confines of the byre. The days are short, the nights long and cold. The pottage becomes even thinner, the ration scarcer. The fear of starvation, a constant undercurrent throughout the year, becomes more pronounced. Discovered in the archives of the Bodleian Library through dusty manorial records from the late 13th century, serfs' diet consisted of little more than coarse bread, pottage, and occasional vegetables. Meat was a rare luxury, reserved for feast days or when an animal was too old or sick to work. Later in the day, as the sun begins its descent, shadows across the land, you pause for a brief respite. Elsbeth, her face smudged with dirt, sits on an overturned bucket. Cheese. Another day, another furrow. She sighs, her voice hollow. I wonder if this is all there is. You offer a tired smile. What else would there be, Elsbeth? The Lord needs his grain. We need this. A group of children, their faces grubby, but their eyes bright with a fleeting energy. Scrawny chicken across the muddy track leading back to the village. Their laughter, though, swallowed by the vastness of the fields. Evenings are spent in much the same way as the mornings. The pottage is reheated, the fire tended. Conversations are sparse, often revolving around the day's labor or the weather. There are no books to read, to listen to, save for the occasional uninspired song sung by a neighbor. The church bell tolls, a reminder of divine order, a higher power that dictates your fate. You might attend vespers, incense, and the low murmur of prayers, a brief distraction from the mundane. But even within the sanctuary, your earthly obligations presses down. The cycle is relentless. You wake, you labor, you eat, you sleep, and you repeat. Grand adventures, no dramatic pronouncements, no moments of profound personal revelation. It is a life of quiet endurance, toil, This is the true essence of the most boring life imaginable, a life where the extraordinary is absent and the ordinary stretches out into an infinite, unchanging horizon. It is a life that, in its sheer, unadulterated sameness, of profound meditation, a slow surrender to the inevitable. As the last embers of the fire die down, casting the cottage into darkness, you close your eyes, anticipating the familiar crow of the rooster that will herald another identical day. Yet, even in this predictable rhythm, there's a subtle shift, a fading of the sharp edges of despair, replaced by a quiet acceptance that prepares you for the next subtle transformation. The primary sources reveal details that will change how you see this entire period, grand pronouncements of heroism or epic battles, but with a quiet, persistent hum of daily existence. You thought you understood this era, the rough, hewn timbers of the longhouse, the earthy scent of damp straw, the rhythmic thud of the flail. The true terror, the existential dread, lies not in the spectre of the plague or the shadow of the castle walls, but in the absolute. It is the slow erosion of self, the gradual surrender of individuality to the relentless tide of necessity. You are no longer the keen-eyed observer, the detached historian, but a cog in a machine that grinds on, day after day, year after year. Grand narrative, no dramatic arc, only the ceaseless cycle of sowing and reaping, birth and decay that brought you here. The tantalizing glimpse into a different life is now a suffocating blanket, the scent of wood smoke and unwashed bodies. Your modern consciousness, once a beacon, is now a flickering candle, guttering against the perpetual twilight of serfdom. The passage of time reveals the insidious nature of this monotony. You wake before dawn, the chill of the packed earth floor seeping through the thin wool of your tunic, the air in your small dwelling, 3 other souls, and the ever-present smell of drying herbs is thick with the breath of slumber. Through the single, you can already discern the faint, pearly light of a new day, indistinguishable from the last. Your hands, calloused beyond recognition, reach for the rough-spun fabric of your trousers, the sensation familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. There is no anticipation, no dread of the unknown, only the dull certainty of labor. Agnes is already stirring, her movements economical, her face etched with a wariness that predates your arrival. Heavy this morn, she murmurs, her voice raspy. The barley will be slow to dry. You grunt in agreement. On your worn leather boots, the soles cracked and stiff. The smell of wood smoke, a constant companion, mingles with the faint of manure from the nearby animal pen. Outside, the village is slowly coming to life. A dog barks somewhere in the distance, drawn-out sound. Elsbeth, your neighbour, is already tending her small patch of flax, her back bent in a perpetual bow. Here, the distant rhythmic ringing of the blacksmith's hammer, a sound that has marked the hours of countless days. First is a meagre affair, a hunk of coarse rye bread, hard as stone, and a bowl of thin pottage. From boiled grains and whatever root vegetables could be scavenged. There are no spices, no sweetness, just sustenance. You eat quickly, already drifting to the fields. Today it is weeding, endless, back-breaking weeding. The sun breaks through the morning mist, offers little warmth, merely a brighter illumination of the toil ahead. The other men of the village, a silent procession heading towards the Lord's fields. John, your fellow serf, walks beside you. Master Thomas said the Lord wishes the south field cleared by week's end. He says, his voice flat, says the harvest will be poor if the weeds take hold. You nod, the words meaning little. Every field needs clearing. Harvest is a gamble against weather and blight. You remember reading about agricultural innovations, rotation, and improved plows, but these are distant whispers, echoes from a world that feels impossibly far away. Here, in the muddy reality of 12th century England, innovation is a luxury few can afford and fewer still understand. As you stoop to pull the tenacious bindweed from the soil, your modern brain attempts to rebuild. It screams for variety, for a change of scenery. For a change of scenery, it conjures images of bustling marketplaces, of libraries filled with ancient texts that spark with ideas. But these images are like phantoms, insubstantial against the gritty reality of dirt under your fingernails and the ache in your lower back. Recall a specific detail from a primary source, perhaps a mention of a particular type of tool used for weeding. Is immense. The names of the tools, the methods of their manufacture, the very language of your former life feels alien. Tongue, the passage of time reveals the slow, almost imperceptible shift within you. The historian's detachment is gone. Dull acceptance. You catch yourself humming a tuneless melody, a sound you've heard Agnes hum while spinning wool. Your focus narrows to the task at hand, identifying the enemy weed, gripping its stem firmly and wrenching it from the earth. The satisfaction, if it can be called that, is purely physical, the release of tension in your muscles, the momentary easing of the ache, a passage from a monastic chronicle detailing the daily routine of a scribe, the hours spent meticulously copying manuscripts, and parchment, the quiet contemplation. It seems like a life of unimaginable luxury compared to this. You remember discussing the concept of leisure with a fellow academic, from a state of enforced idleness for the elite to a valued commodity in the modern world. Here, leisure is a foreign concept. Every waking moment is accounted for by the demands of survival. Midday brings a brief respite. You sit on the damp earth, on another piece of bread and sharing a water skin with John. Did you hear about Richard's youngest? John asks, fixed on the horizon, taken by the fever. Just yesterday he was chasing chickens. You offer a word of sympathy, practiced gesture. Death is a constant presence, a familiar shadow that flits through the village. And the old with equal indifference. There is no elaborate mourning, no lengthy eulogy. The dead are buried quickly. Their small plots of land absorbed back into the communal struggle for survival. The passage of time reveals the resilience of the human spirit, but also its capacity for brutal pragmatism. Later, as the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the fields, you return to your dwelling. The smell of roasting leeks and onions from a nearby cottage. You are weary, not just in body, but in spirit. The day has been long, the labor arduous. The reward is merely the promise of another identical day tomorrow. You look at Agnes, illuminated by the dim light of a tallow candle, as she mends a torn tunic. Her hands move with practiced efficiency, her mind likely already on the tasks of the morrow. You try to conjure the thrill of discovery, spark that once ignited your passion for history. But the flame is all but extinguished, has become what is, and what is a relentless, unglamorous grind. You are no longer Sleepy the historian in the labyrinth of the past. You are simply a serf, your consciousness slowly dissolving into the fabric of this unyielding reality. Sought in dusty archives now press in on you, tangible and suffocating. The starkness of your existence, philosophy of genuine choice, is the most profound revelation of all. You are a ghost in your own life, your former self fading with each passing, indistinguishable hour. Your modern mind, once a vibrant landscape, coming a barren plain, the only landmarks the endless fields and the ever-present demands of survival. The dream is fading, is far more profound in its ordinariness than you could ever have imagined. The passage of time reveals the quiet horror of a life lived without the possibility of change. A slow surrender to the inevitable settles around you now. Imagine darkness that meant something completely different. Not the gentle fade of twilight to rest in the soft glow of lamps, but a suffocating, profound absence of light, a primal fear that clung to the very air. The darkness that descended upon the thatch-roofed hovels of a nameless English village, perhaps somewhere in the sprawling fenlands of East Anglia circa 1348. The air, acrid tang of wood smoke and something less definable than ever present scent of unwashed bodies, of animal dung, would press in, a physical weight. Your eyes, accustomed to the gentle luminescence of the moon, or the flickering flame of a tallow candle, would strain against this void. There would be no hum of electricity, no distant drone of traffic, of straw betting, the occasional cough from a nearby pallet, cry of an owl from the skeletal branches of an ancient oak that stood sentinel over the sleeping community. Deepens as you consider the sheer, unyielding monotony. Imagine waking not to the gentle chime of an alarm, a warm shower and a cup of coffee, but to the immediate, visceral reality of cold, the air inside the wattle and daub dwelling, shared with livestock during the harshest months, would be bone-chilling. Your breath would mist before you, a fleeting ghost in the gloom. Wool of your tunic likely itchy and smelling faintly of sweat and stale ale, little solace against the damp chill that permeated everything. Your first conscious thought, the primal urge to simply survive the night, would not be of your day's agenda, but of the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. The meagre supper of pottage, a thick, watery gruel of barley or oats, with a few withered leeks or beans, if you were fortunate, would have long since been digested, leaving a hollow ache. Your hands, and calloused from a life of manual labor, would instinctively reach for the coarse blanket, pulling it tighter. Fibers against your skin would be a constant reminder of the world you inhabited. No soft cotton sheets, no plush duvet, while providing a degree of insulation from the packed earth floor, would be stiff and uneven. Mattress that offered no contouring comfort. The sounds, too, would be starkly different. The distant bleating of sheep, the snort of a pig rooting in the mire outside, the creak of timbers as the structure settled, these would be your symphony. Gentle murmur of nature documentaries, no soothing ambient music to ease you into wakefulness. The world outside would demand immediate attention, not with the subtle suggestion of a sunrise, with the harsh reality of a new day of relentless toil. Standing deepens as you consider the stark limitations of your existence. Imagine the sheer absence of choice. Your life, the moment you drew your first breath in this era, was largely predetermined. You were born to this land, to this lord. Your purpose was to work it, to generate wealth for those above you. The concept of personal ambition, self-improvement beyond the immediate needs of survival, would be utterly alien. You would rise with the sun or before it, would be dictated by the seasons and the demands of the manor. The agricultural cycle was your clock tie, ploughing in spring, sowing in summer, reaping in autumn, and enduring the lean, cold months of winter. There were no holidays in the modern sense. Forward to. Every day was a workday, punctuated only by the feast days of the church, the only occasions for respite and a slightly more varied diet, perhaps a scrap of salted meat or a small piece of cheese. Your understanding deepens as you visualize the village itself, Picture the cluster of roughly built dwellings, walls of wattle and daub, their roofs thatched with reeds or straw, often uneven and stained with soot from the central hearth, would curl lazily from openings in the roofs, a constant, hazy presence in the air. The ground between the huts would be churned mud, with refuse, the omnipresent evidence of animal life, chickens scratching, pigs rooting, dogs scavenging. No paved pathways, no manicured gardens. The village church, a solid stone structure that stood in contrast to the ephemeral nature of the dwellings, would be the focal point of spiritual authority and the promise of an afterlife that offered a stark contrast to the harsh realities of this one. Church, while a symbol of hope, was also a constant reminder of your place in the divine hierarchy. As you recall the conversations you've overheard, the snippets of life as lived by those around you. Old Elsbeth, of hardship, complaining about the damp seeping into her bones, her voice a raspy whisper. Young Agnes, her hands already chapped and bleeding from helping her mother with the spinning, her eyes wide with a weariness far beyond her years. The men, their bodies stooped from endless hours in the fields, would speak in hushed tones of the Lord's demands, ode to the church of the constant struggle against hunger and disease. There were no grand pronouncements, philosophical debates, only the pragmatic concerns of survival. Did you see the blight on the barley, Thomas? John might ask, his brow furrowed with worry. The Lord's reeve was out again this morning, demanding the full measure, even with the harvest so poor. The conversations were utilitarian, focused on the immediate, the tangible. Understanding deepens as you consider the lack of stimulation, devoid of the constant barrage of information we experience today. No television, no radio, no internet. The few precious manuscripts held by the clergy. Your world would be small, and the surrounding fields. News traveled slowly, often distorted and exaggerated. Beyond your immediate experience was a place of myth and legend, distant kings, fearsome beasts, present threat of the unknown. Even the stories told around the fire would be retellings of ancient tales, moralistic fables, local events often amplified and embellished. The sheer absence of novelty, of new experiences, would be a profound emptiness. The standing deepens as you reflect on the physical labor. Imagine the sheer, unrelenting exertion required for every task. With a heavy plow pulled by oxen, sowing seeds by hand, scything the grain, binding sheaves, threshing the crop with flails, carrying water from the well, chopping firewood, mending tools, spinning wool. Every action demanded significant physical effort. There were no machines to ease the burden, to simplify tasks. Your body would ache constantly, your muscles strained, your hands raw. The concept of leisure, purely for enjoyment or self-enrichment, would be an unimaginable luxury. Understanding deepens as you consider the ever-present threat of death. Life was fragile and mortality was a constant companion. Disease was rampant and medical knowledge was rudimentary at best. A simple infection could be fatal, perilous for both mother and infant. Famine was a recurring threat, especially after poor harvests. The plague through Europe in the mid-14th century was a terrifying manifestation of this vulnerability. Populations and leaving behind a landscape of fear and despair. You would witness death regularly, often in its most brutal forms. The rituals surrounding it would be a somber part of village life. Your understanding deepens as you return to the present, a comfort of your own bed. The sheets are soft, cool against your skin. The mattress contours to your body, a cradle of support. In the room is clean, regulated by unseen forces. You can hear the gentle hum of your refrigerator, the distant whisper of traffic. Sounds that are so commonplace they are usually ignored, but now they are the melody of security, your hands smooth and unblemished on the duvet. You can feel the warmth generated by the layers of fabric, a luxurious insulation against the night. This outside is benign, a gentle invitation to sleep, not a suffocating shroud. You take a deep breath, and the air fills your lungs. There is no lingering smell of smoke, no damp earth, no animal musk. You are safe, warm, utterly free from the relentless, soul-crushing drudgery that defined the lives of so many throughout history. The sheer, overwhelming relief washes over you. The simple act of being able to choose what to eat, what to wear, where to go, these are freedoms so profound, so deeply ingrained that you have likely never consciously considered them. But now, after this imagined journey, their value is immeasurable. You are not bound by the land, by the Lord, by the season, starvation or disease. You are, in the most fundamental sense, free. The mundane, the everyday, overlooked comforts of your modern existence, these are not trivialities. They are the extraordinary privileges of your time. Beautiful contrast to a life that was, for most, the most boring, the most arduous, and the most precarious imaginable. Drift towards sleep. You carry with you a newfound, profound appreciation for the quiet miracle of your own time.